Thank you. John? Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honorable members. Good morning to colleagues and to all of the wonderful people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines who are listening to us here today in this important exercise, which is the annual presentation of the budget. Madam Speaker, before I get into the presentation, I wish to begin by remembering the victims and the families of the rock gutter tragedy. As you know, last Sunday we celebrated, well, celebration is probably not the right word, but commemorated the 10th anniversary of the terrible tragedy in which 7 beautiful young children on their way to school died and shook the nation. I attended a commemorative service last Sunday in Fancy, and we pray, Madam Speaker, that the families and the community will continue to heal, and may the souls of those departed children rest in peace. Now, Madam Speaker, I will attempt to unpack what we heard yesterday in the budget presentation of the Honourable Minister. And of course, there will be reference made as well to some aspects of last week's debate, because although we separate them for technical reasons, it's basically part of the same process. Because last week, you'll recall that we, in this Honourable House, debated the estimates that were presented by the Honourable Minister. And we had some things to say about that. Let me begin by saying, Madam Speaker, that I've been in this House for a long time. And I've seen budgets come from the other side, various different qualities and with different focus. But what I have come to understand and to, I wouldn't say appreciate, but really to expect, is that whether it's in the estimates, as we pointed out last week, or in the budget presentation itself, is that we can't take the minister at his word. We've seen that over and over again. The numbers and the fiction that is presented in the estimates and the promises that are made in the budgets, that we cannot trust the government to mean what they say. We can't trust them to deliver on their promises. The minister took a long time yesterday talking about, oh, we promised this and we did it, Promised to paint a building, we painted. The promise to cut the grass, we cut it. To seek to give the impression, Madam Speaker, that, this document, when they compile it, that they're serious about what they're saying and that they intend to do it, either to implement it in full, as some of it is expected to be done, or at least to start in the year 2025 or 2024 or 2023, whenever. Because the budget, we do this thing annually, not every 3 or 4 years. So what's in here is intended to apply to the year on which we are embarking. So you can't say, well, it's here. We put it down here 2 or 3 years ago, as he said, with the so-called roads revolution. But now we are at the stage where we're implementing it. That is just excuse. I know that they will disagree with me, but it's up to the members of the public to decide. Madam Speaker, our country has been through a lot in recent times. We have had natural disasters, and those have been compounded by many man-made errors, a lot of them stemming from the government. We have had social and economic hardships thrust upon us, but much of them are also made by our own hands. And again, compounded by governmental indifference, neglect, and downright incompetence. The devastating impact of Hurricane Beryl was the most recent and the most tragic that we have had. Lives and livelihoods were lost. We heard that 5 persons died that we account for. But there were 5 others who are still missing, feared dead. On the MV guidance, I believe there is going to be a vigil this weekend for them. It's been 6 months, Madam Speaker. So while we always wish to hope, we also have to face the grim reality that they may not come back. Our hearts are with the families of those who were lost. There were 5 of them on that boat. That they will have the strength to come to terms with this and receive some comfort from the support they will have in the community on the weekend at the vigil. And in all things, Madam Speaker, God knows best. We are a resilient people in this country. Madam Speaker, a proud fact of our history is the struggle that our forebears engaged in against insurmountable odds to secure the sovereignty of this country, to protect their land. That is a proud feature of our history. It wasn't taught to me in that way when I was in primary and secondary school. That is how old I am. But today we have a better appreciation for that struggle and take strength and encouragement from it to know that even when you may think you can't win, you still must do the right thing. As a resilient people, Madam Speaker, working together in good faith and with concern and love for one another, we can overcome this disaster. As we have overcome disasters in the past. This is not the first, Beryl not the first. The eruptions of Soufriere volcano in 2021, that's not the first. I'm old enough to remember vividly. the eruption in 1971 and 1979. Madam Speaker, it is my role, and I have a duty to represent all the people of this nation in holding this government accountable. And I intend to do that today, and my colleagues will, in their presentations, to follow. And from time to time, we're not all simply doing this to be negative, but it's simply the role that's been entrusted to us. So from time to time, we commend the government for things done well. And there are a couple of instances that I may mention in my own presentation here today, and I suspect it might elicit a smile from the Minister of Finance. But hopefully, only one or two. Madam Speaker, for the most part, our job is to seek to uncover the problems with the government's approach and the failings that have resulted from them, because there are consequences to the actions of government. And they affect people, ordinary people, vulnerable people, who may not have been intended victims of those mistakes. As I said, Madam Speaker, the object, of course, it's not to embarrass the government, it's not to call them out, but it's to hold them accountable, to ensure that we can push the institutions of government, the persons who occupy those seats of government, that we can push them to do better for the people of this country. So what I want the people who are listening beyond this room, I know it will not make much of an impact to my colleagues on the other side, but the people who are listening beyond this room to understand that that is the objective. This is not a game, this is not a sport. This is serious business, especially in this particular exercise of budget, where we are here to represent the best interests of our people. And so, Madam Speaker, that is what we do, even when the government boasts about the things that they have done and that they're planning to do. And when we take issue with them, that is the objective in mind, nothing else. Over the years, Mr. Eustace, when he was leader of the opposition, and since then, Madam Speaker, we have had a really very difficult task of trying to get this government to respond constructively to what we point out to them. They have been stubborn and pig-headed in their approach, believing or giving the impression that they alone are the only fount of wisdom, not just in this parliament, but on the planet. Belatedly, circumstances have caught up with them, and it is clear, Madam Speaker, for all to see that this government, they have lost their grip on the affairs of the nation. They have lost touch with the issues, and as a result, Madam Speaker, their actions have been ineffectual. And the result is our country is literally falling apart. It is evident in the most obvious things like the infrastructure. Never mind the brag and boast of the minister yesterday. The things we can see. It is also evident in those things that we have to uncover, and some of which I will mention in my budget presentation. Through diligent research and, Madam Speaker, careful analysis of what is before us. But they, on the other side, after so many years in office, they have allowed themselves to become trapped, if you like, in a bubble of their own making. And what's worse, Madam Speaker, it's inflated every day by their egotism and their self-adulation, which has kept them more and more isolated from the concerns of our people. And deliberately or otherwise, they have become oblivious to those concerns. And I'll point out again a couple of examples to illustrate this, if any illustration is needed. Madam Speaker, this approach cannot continue without causing irreparable harm to our nation. Our people have taken note of it. They tell me this, Madam Speaker, when I walk about in Kingstown, maybe not in the same words I've used here today. They tell me it when I go to the villages in the far reaches of this country, when I go to the southern Grenadines. The lament and concern, Madam Speaker, is consistent. That the government does not seem to appreciate their circumstances. Daily, more and more of them are seeing the realities beyond the rhetoric of the members of this administration. And the truth is, Madam Speaker, they don't like what they see. When I go to a bar with friends, meet people on the street here in Kingstown, someone on the ferry, someone at a funeral, any part of the country, the conversation always turn with a certain urgency because they know who I am as the leader of the opposition. They know what my responsibility is. And they turn to me with a certain urgency and saying, we got to get a change in this country, Friday, and we're relying on you to make it happen.
You're in the brain for sure.
So they want to change it, Madam Speaker. Never on a Friday. Well, we'll do it on a Wednesday then. The government, Madam Speaker, this government, they've been in power longer than any. Let me put it out there, because I like this, As I say, they're in Texas. Everything is bigger and larger. The government, they have been in power longer than any government in history in this country. And the Prime Minister has been in the head of government longer than any Prime Minister in the history of this country. But not the longest ever. You know, Robert Mugabe, for example, in Zimbabwe was in power longer than him. Yeah? And look at the consequence for his country. You should not take that bait. Yeah. 36 years. So, Madam Speaker, the decision, I listened to you yesterday. Yeah, thank you. All right. Thank you. Yeah, you have good manners. I appreciate that. The government, Madam Speaker, as I said, they've been longer in power than anyone. But that is a reason that they have an obligation, I believe, that sooner rather than later, to give the people of this country an opportunity to decide on the next mandate going forward. Now, in summary, Madam Speaker, on the budget. We said this last week, but not everybody would have been listening then, so I'll do a bit of recap here. As usual, the budget is bigger than any budget before. That's a theme. That's a consistent theme of this government. Every year is a bigger budget. So this is bigger than ever before. Somebody asked me yesterday on Sunday, why they do it, why they feel that it has to be bigger and bigger and bigger every year. And to be honest, I couldn't come up with a sensible explanation other than to say, well, they probably feel that in the people's consciousness it means that the country is moving forward. But, Madam Speaker, to the figures, the overall budget is $1,851,387,634. So it's a $1.85 billion. As the minister said yesterday, it's a deficit budget. The current deficit, as he presented it, is $5.6 million. So we can't meet our ordinary expenses in running the government. Amortization, that is paying back the loans we have borrowed, is $215.4 million. And the sinking fund, which is money we set aside to pay off bonds and so forth, $22 million we do every year, at least on paper. So the total the overall deficit is $639.9 million. That is stated in the minister's budget presentation at page 93. Madam Speaker, that's neither here nor there. What is important is some of the concerns that we raised last week in the estimates debate, and we have done year after year, because the problem recurs year after year. And that is, Madam Speaker, to look at how the figures are presented to see if they are credible and whether the budget is based on a solid foundation. So that everything else, because you know, if the foundation is flawed, then anything else that comes after that, or everything else that comes after that, is equally flawed. In fact, it makes the problem worse. So one of the things that we have pointed out over the years is that there is a big hole in the budget which is captured in the capital receipts item called other receipts. The budget, Madam Speaker, essentially is constructed in the summary. There is the revenue that the government intends to collect over the course of the year, and the expenditures that they intend to make. You have the current revenue, which you spoke about and said that they're collecting less than they're actually spending on current expenditures. And then you have capital revenue. And other receipts falls within the category of capital revenue, which means that as it's presented in the estimates, that those monies are supposed to go towards capital projects. So, Madam Speaker, what we have here is a situation where you have under other receipts, $280.5 million. Last year it was $215 million. I believe in 2023 it was $198 million possibly, something like that. Or maybe, I don't know. But anyway, the number keeps going up. Just like the budget gets larger, the whole that we call capital receipts also gets larger. So the problem is compounded. The other receipts, which is a category of funding that the government puts in the estimates, but which they never receive very much of. It accounts for now, in this year, 15% of the total expenditure of the government. 15%. And they don't know where the money is going to come from. If you put it as a percentage of capital expenditure, which is where it's intended to be spent, it accounts for 40% of capital expenditure. They never collect much of this money, as I said. So, as represented, it's a gaping hole within the budget. According to the Director of Audit, in the 2019 report, for example, where she indicated that $198 million in other receipts is budgeted, yet only $3 million was raised. That's less than 2% of the capital revenue. So where the rest of the money coming from? And remember, according to the estimates, if you look at page Roman numerals 7, it indicates that other capital receipts comes from domestic sources, so they intended to collect that money domestically. This is after having accounted for all the borrowings and all the grants that they say they would get during the course of the year. So it's quite clear, Madam Speaker, that that is unrealistic. And the question we ask ourselves year after year is, why do you put it in the budget? I mean, can you imagine a business running its affairs this way, or a CEO presenting to his board or to the shareholders, when in fact, their financial statements, where they said, well, we making a profit of $100 million, is composed this way. We have $50 million. We're not quite sure where we're going to make that money, but we are projecting that profit. They will fire you. And I mean, we've been urging the people of this country to fire the government for this for a long, long time. And we are hoping, Madam Speaker, that finally this year they're going to do it. So, Madam Speaker, we've asked many times of the minister to explain it. And he usually ignores us. But this time, he said that he would try to explain. However, what he says to me, it compounds the confusion. If we look at page 93 of the budget presentation of the Honorable Minister of Finance, he sets out in summary form various aspects of the funding that they will receive, how it's going to be allocated, and so forth. But then on page 93, we get to other receipts. And he sets out to explain. Remember, I'm asking, because other receipts, it's money coming in. We are asking, where do you expect to get it from? So what he does is he says here, other receipts represent, and I'm reading now, the financing for capital budget for which the source of funds is yet to be determined. That part we understand. Secondly, it includes the financing of the amortization. And thirdly, we're talking about receipts, that it includes the sinking funds contributions. And the fourth point, component, is it includes modest current account deficit. When a deficit is a deficit is not receipts. So he then sets out each of these, the numbers. He said the unidentified capital financing amounts to $33.2 million. The amortization, as I've said earlier too in my own presentation, amounts to $215.4 million. The sinking fund contribution is $22 million. And the current account deficit that he indicates in this document is $5.6 million. Madam Speaker, that adds up to $276.2 million. It does not even add up to the $280.5 million that we say amounts to, is for other receipts. So even the figures that it presents here don't add up to the amount. I mean, you might say that's a slight overhang, you know, it's a whatever. The explanation, it's over $4 million. The point is, Madam Speaker, that is what is presented, and it doesn't quite add up. Then, here's the explanation that he's presenting. He said, so we have the other receipts, he gives the components, then he breaks it down and says, this is how much each component contributes to other receipts. So then he explains what it means. He says, during the period, and I'm reading, of the preparation of the budget, negotiations for funding for several capital projects are ongoing. That's understandable. It would therefore be premature to identify a given funding agency as financing Project A or Project B. Although there is a strong likelihood that the funding may come to fruition during the fiscal year. He didn't say definitely will, he said a strong likelihood. So, strong likelihood it may not. We know, however, historically, that they don't get anything more than 5%. 1 year they might get something. I think they got an IDA contribution during one of the disasters that pushed it up in 1 year. But that's unusual. The director of audit usually reports on this in a report, but of course they are behind time. The most recent one we have is for 2021. But it is clear that they don't receive this money. So if he's saying that, oh, there's a strong likelihood and we're planning on this and so forth, then that is a big hope. So he goes on to say, Madam Speaker, as funding arrangements are concluded, the finances raised will be accounted for on the basis of their source, be they external loans, grants, or local loans. Well, in fact, capital receipts, according to its categorization here in the estimates, have said at Roman numeral 7, supposed to come from local loans, local sources. So, Madam Speaker, what we have here is a situation where it appears that what the minister is presenting is saying that this is how we come up with this number for capital receipts, because we take these things into account and we put them together, and this somehow balances the budget. But it's not a source of revenue. A deficit is not a source of revenue. Amortization is not a source of revenue. It's not a receipt. So the question now comes. He says that capital receipts is made up of amortization, which means that that has to be paid at some point. If it has to be paid, then the money has to come from somewhere. The money can't come from amortization. We say, putting it in there the way he did, it's confusing, obviously, but that is simply to say this is how it's comprised. That is what the funding will go for. But where does it come from to pay amortization? And amortization is paid all the time. The government can't default on its debt. It cannot default on its debt, so it has to pay that money. So the minister has a duty to explain where the money comes from to pay the amortization. Is it a fact? Is it that they're floating bonds to pay, raise the funds to pay the debt? I hope, Madam Speaker, that the minister will do us have the courtesy to explain this, because, as I say, the way he's presented it in his budget here, it creates more confusion. It is simply not explaining the source, but it also raises the question, Madam Speaker, since he has now included amortization as a component, as a part of this problem of other receipts, that we have to now say, well, okay, where are the funds coming from to pay the amortization? And also, Madam Speaker, to pay sinking funds contribution, which is an allocation of $22 million every year. And the reason that is there, Madam Speaker, it's prudent, because when you have bonds that come due, mature at different times, the government has to have the money somewhere to pay when it comes. You can't go back and borrow to pay something else, which seems to be the practice you're doing. You should not. That's true. Prudently, you should not. You should put aside that money to pay it. But, Madam Speaker, the reason why I ask, I said, on paper, so we have, just to make sure that I'm being followed here, we've dealt now here with the capital receipts, the amortization, and a part of it, he says, also is the sinking fund contribution of $22 million. And I asked the question as to whether those funds are there on paper or they are actually in the account that is supposed to be set up to pay this money over the course of time. And I asked this question, Madam Speaker, not idly. I ask it because the Director of Audit in the most recent report pointed out that in fact it does not happen, or it has not happened in some instances. And I will read from that because it's very telling. You know, the minister comes here and he talks about responsibility and fiscal responsibility and creativity and all of this and so forth in managing the affairs of the country. Well, what we want, Madam Speaker, more than anything else when you're dealing with the people's money is honesty. What we're thinking here, Madam Speaker, what we need most of all is honesty. So here is what we have. The Director of Audit says that this is in the 2021 report at page 75. Sinking fund contribution all right. Yes, I'm reading the relevant part. Remember, the question I'm asking, is whether the sinking fund money is being set aside. It's there in the budget. It's here in the estimates. And they come and they will tell you that they are the most responsible government since, well, governments were invented. So you go all the way back to ancient times. And so I asked the question whether it is being put in the account. And this is what the Director of Audit said in the most recent report. She said sinking fund contribution of $22 million was provided for under recurrent expenditure in the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the financial year 2021. However, this amount was not deposited to the sinking fund investment account. The only inflow to the sinking fund investment account was interest received, and that was a small amount. So then we go down to the bottom of the page to another relevant portion of, I can't read the whole thing, but it's good, it's not exactly bedtime reading, but it's good to read this to understand. It's a little out, behind time, but it's still relevant because this government has been in power all that time. It is instructive for us to see, Madam Speaker, behind all of the big talk that they give and explanations and sleight of hand that they give to try to bamboozle people and to get away from their reckless behavior in management of the finances of the country. So here is the second part of what the Director of Audit said in that report. She said, in financial years 2019 to 2021, contribution to the sinking fund has not been made in accordance with chapters 253 and 254 of the laws of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Consequently, because there always is a consequence, it's not something that is abstract, there always is a consequence. Consequently, during financial year 2021, funds from the Fiscal Reserve to ECCB account were utilized to repay the principal on a bond. Should, and this is the advice now that the Director of Audit has presented. And the trouble is, Madam Speaker, the Director of Audit's advice should be taken. It's an independent office. It's an important part of our architecture of accountability in the Constitution of our country. But they tend to be ignored. So the Director of Audit says this: should this practice of non-contribution to the sinking fund persist, the government may encounter difficulties sourcing funds to discharge its financial obligations as outstanding bonds reach maturity. That's a hell of a hook in the gill of the people of this country, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, we see, I set out to say at the beginning, we have to unpack what we see as figures in the documents and as representations made by the Minister of Finance to understand really what is going on. And I don't believe I've captured everything here, Madam Speaker. But what I see alarms me, it troubles me, Madam Speaker, about how the finances of the country have been managed. And you can see the consequences, you know. They tell you, oh, it's Beryl this and it's that and so on. Of course, there are factors in the mix. But Beryl has taken the blame for far too many things in this Parliament. Madam Speaker, so there are those two problems I've identified in the financial arrangements. The third thing that I want to mention, and I've said this in the past, and the problem has not been rectified, certainly based on the evidence that we see from the Director of Audit. And again, as I say, it's 3 years behind time. So the Minister, when he gets up to speak, he can say, well, listen, you know, since 2021, we have seen the light, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, we are doing it right going forward now. He has that opportunity when he gets up in his rebuttal to say that, if that's the case. But here's the thing. Let me explain the problem. That is a problem of the serious problem of the overdraft, abuse of the overdraft facility that is presented by Parliament. Madam Speaker, under the laws, the Parliament, the government is allowed to borrow a certain amount of money, set up a facility, essentially intended to allow the government to have a cash flow until the funds that we have passed in the Parliament here for financing the various projects come in. And the intention is that it's a fluctuating overdraft depending on particular current needs. And so that money would be put back when it comes in from the source that is identified in the estimate. The problem is, Madam Speaker, that has not been done. So you have Parliament will come here and we will debate. Let me read the resolution. The Parliament would come here and we will present a resolution to get the laws, because we're a country of laws, that's what they say. We're a country of laws, so the resolution comes to Parliament. And they say, let me read you one for this year. Be it resolved that this honorable House do authorize, that is to say, we're giving that authority, do authorize the Minister of Finance to borrow by means of fluctuating overdraft or otherwise from First National Bank of St. Lucia Limited or the Republic Bank Limited or the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, money to an amount not exceeding in the aggregate $85 million. And here's the very important part. During the period, the 1st of January 2025, that's for this year. We had a similar one last year. I don't remember if it was 85 or 60 million at the time. The period of January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2025 for the purpose of meeting current requirements of the government. So it's all specified there. The Parliament authorizing it, the time frame in which it's authorized for, a one-year period, and the purpose to meet current requirements of the government. That's the law. It's written on the paper. They come here and they bring the resolution as required by law, and we pass it. But what has happened, Madam Speaker, is that routinely this limit has been exceeded. In the past, well, let me just say, in the 2025 estimates, the overdraft now stands at $118.4 million. We are authorizing in this Parliament an amount of $85 million, which is about 35 million more than I remember that we used to do, 50 at one time. And even that larger amount is being exceeded. But here, Madam Speaker, the problem is that the second part, the last line where I said is to meet current, I can't tell you what happened to the money. Because we don't have the explanation as to what that money was used for. That is a lot of money for the government to lose track of. They started, responding to it as though it was some sort of clerical error. But you can't make the same clerical error every year. And it begs credulity, Madam Speaker, to suggest that something as important as this would be, as a result of a clerical error. What happened? They got addicted to put an extra zero at the end of everything. So, what happened to that money? I ask the question again. Was it misplaced? Using the most benign explanation. Was it misspent? Was it misappropriated? The director of audit says she doesn't know what happened. And if she doesn't know what happened, then certainly I don't know what happened. The members on this side of the House don't know what happened. The Minister of Finance, however, ought to know what happened to the money. Last year when I raised it in this budget, in the budget presentation, he said that they had appointed 2 young persons in the ministry, 2 accountants, specifically to deal with this matter, and that they had reached, I think, up to 2012, from 2010 to 2012, in seeking to reconcile it. I don't know what they have found or what the actual result was, and I hope that at some point, given that this matter has been raised in the Parliament, that the resolution of it, that it would be brought to the Parliament so we could understand what exactly is happening and satisfy ourselves as to whether it is properly accounted for. So, as I said last year, the minister said that they were dealing with, or maybe it was an answer to a question, I can't remember. But anyway, I raised it again last year in the budget debate, and he said that this was being done, that they had put 2 persons to work on it, and that they were progressing. So I want to ask him if he will report to the House how this matter, after another year, is progressing, if at all. It should have been, can't take you a whole year to reconcile accounts, Madam Speaker. If that's the case, then you have a serious problem. That is no longer an accounting exercise. That is something else. Madam Speaker, I want to, so here was what I've done so far. We have looked at the financial, the handling of the country's finances by the government. We haven't even talked about debt yet, and debt sustainability and all of that. We're talking here now just of the procedural aspects of it. And I found them severely wanting in the way they have done so. But we pointed out last week as well, in the estimates debate, that this document, there's some parts of it, Madam Speaker, it's not worth the paper it's written on, because the information that is required, it's set out there in the columns. It says here, you have key performance indicators, or whatever they call them, actions that they're supposed to perform. And you look in the column where they're supposed to report, and nothing is there. There's no information. And this happens in the minister's own ministry. So he's leading by bad example. It happened in the Prime Minister's ministry. And throughout the document, you find that the information, important information to report back to say, well, listen, last year we gave this department so much and so much money to spend from the public purse. These are the things we said in the estimates that they were going to do with that money. They are supposed to report back how they have achieved, if at all, those objectives. And when you don't even bother to write something in there, it tells me either that you don't care, that this is just some sort of a optional exercise, or you haven't done anything with the money. What are we supposed to conclude based on this practice? It's unacceptable, Madam Speaker. It is not, again, just a matter of individual public servants making errors here and there. That's human. But, Madam Speaker, this is not an error. This is a screw-up. Gone all the way through. You know? I'm not going to repeat the specific instances that I pointed out in the estimates debate last week, and my other colleagues also mentioned it. But what I'm going to say, Madam Speaker, is the question is this. As I said, the minister is one of the transgressors. I won't say he's the most or the worst, but he's one of the transgressors, and he shouldn't be. He should set example. But the question is this: if we can't trust the minister to provide the information required by the estimates that he produces, and have it reflected in the document that we are considering here and the public will get an opportunity to look at, then who can we trust? Which of the other ministers will take their obligations more seriously and rise to a higher standard than the Minister of Finance? The Minister of Education, I did commend him last week, because in the unit, the continuing adult and continuing education unit, I saw there that they had set out their indicators. They had reported back on what they had achieved, and all of, if not all, well, very much, all of the various indicators were filled in. The information was there. And so it can be done. When it's not done, I have to assume that people just don't care. I'm not saying it happened all through, you know. And don't worry, I have some things to say to you just now. So just, it will all be praised and thank you. Yeah. So, Madam Speaker, here we have a problem of trust. But, Madam Speaker, that is, let's say at the very least, call it sloppiness. But the sloppiness becomes farce almost, Madam Speaker, when the minister says, for example, that he intends to spend $696.3 million in capital projects, on capital projects. This is in the estimates. If you look at the financial summary. Roman numerals one, yes, $696.3 million in capital expenditure. But, Madam Speaker, he also says in the same document that he intends to raise $943.6 million in capital receipts. That is $247 million more than is needed to finance the implementation of those capital projects. So what does this mean? Everybody knows you're going to build a house. You go to the bank, the contractor tells you it's going to cost you $250,000. You have $50,000, you go and borrow $200, or maybe get it down a little lower, $275, because your uncle might lend you something, or $175, whatever. But here the minister is saying, according to the document, yeah, is the prefab stuff you're going to bring just now. That's what, yeah. Yeah, you're laughing, but it won't distract me from the important point I'm making. The point is this, Madam Speaker. It doesn't make sense to say that we intend to spend $696 million, but we intend to raise $943 million to finance that project. That's $247 million more than is needed. And you see, if, as I said, you know, you're building a house and you need $200,000 and you're a rich uncle and you say, okay, I can lend you $300 so you can help furnish it, that's fine because you ain't paying no interest on it. But here, most of the money that they say they're going to raise is borrowed money. You know, $63.3 million is grants, $495.4 million is in external loans, $103 million from local loans. And then they have, of course, other receipts of $280 million. The point is that $598 million of that money is borrowed. So you're paying you're paying interest on this excess borrowing. And I know you can't be doing that. It don't make sense. So the point is, why is it in the document? What are we to make of it? And how can we trust the document when what we see here is not what we are intended to take away from the budget exercise? That is beyond sloppiness. That is a fraud on the people of the country, Madam Speaker. There's a fraud on the people of the country. That's right. So, Madam Speaker, we have here. I asked the minister last year to explain why this is the case. He didn't bother to me because, you know, this is nonsense to the people, he figures, so they don't understand it, so why do I have to bother to explain? But I want to ask this question to you, Madam Speaker. For the experienced professionals who work in the ministry, how does the minister get these experienced, trained, professional public servants to present this mess to the public as a serious budget at the risk of suffering serious reputational damage? Another question to answer. But again, as usual, there will be no answer because it doesn't seem that, Madam Speaker, this is something that they care about. And I've said before that this practice has to end because creating more debt puts more pressure on the people of this country. And taxpayers are overburdened by debt. They are overburdened by the rising cost of living, for which there is no relief in this budget. And they're tired, Madam Speaker, of the sleight of hand and the lies and the empty promises that we hear from the minister year after year. But the people of this country, it will be their best chance later this year, when we have elections, to put this all to an end. And then let us start afresh, applying the rules, the laws, the guardrails that are there for governing the country. And then maybe, as was done, Madam Speaker, under the NDP government for 17 and a half years, that we will have a situation where the government runs a current account surplus every year.
Yeah.
And you won't have a situation, Madam Speaker, as you have with this government, that you have a little project going on, they say, well, you have to get some counterpart funding because we ain't giving you the money until you put something in the pot. And they can't even come up with that, they gotta go borrow it. So we have to go back to the practice that we had followed under the NDP. And don't forget, the NDP followed that practice for 17 and a half years. And we had an average annual growth rate of approaching 5% over the course, the entire time of the NDP in office. So you can have proper fiscal management and financial management without what they like to call creativity and still deliver for the people of the country. But, Madam Speaker, as I said, my colleagues will continue to deal with some of these other matters, and I'm conscious of the passage of time. So I wish now to move to consider not every aspect of the minister's budget presentation, because truthfully, not everything in the budget is worthy of a response. But what I will do, Madam Speaker, I look at certain key aspects of it and unpack it, as I said at the beginning. One of the things that people tell me, and my colleagues, when we go out to meet the people, because that is something that we do, and the members on the government side, they're afraid to go meet the people. But we're afraid to go meet the people. But we go and we meet the people, and they tell us, Madam Speaker, what the concerns are. One of the main things that they talk about is the rising cost of living. I see it, Madam Speaker. My colleagues will tell you, I shop every day. I do the grocery shopping for my family most of the time. Every day when I'm in Kingston, yeah, pretty much. No, that's my routine. I go to the ferry, I pass at one of the grocery stores, and I get my stuff. So I know when the prices go up. I see people in the line putting back things. I hear people grumbling and complaining and cussing about the cost of living, how last week this was this and this week is this, and how they can't afford this and so forth. It's a real problem. And the minister acknowledges the high cost of living when he speaks of the effect of inflation at page 19 of his budget presentation. He seemed, however, to suggest that the worst of the problem is behind us. At page 19, Madam Speaker, he said that talks about the IMF talks about global inflation, still elevated level of food prices, and they're passed on to countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. However, it is fair to say that the worst of the inflationary spike is behind us, and that inflation levels, though elevated, are trending in the right direction. I don't know who does his grocery, as I was saying, because for most Vincentians, they will tell you that the situation isn't getting better, it's getting worse. That cost of living is crushing them. And there is no easing of the problem. It's getting worse. I see the Honorable Frederick Stevenson porked up, so maybe he does his own shopping and he knows to.
How do I get into your discussion? How do I get into your discussion?
No, I see you were looking at me and I was talking. So.
Talk the budget.
Talk the budget.
Do the estimates.
All right.
Talk the budget.
All right. All right. Well, I apologize if I disturbed your slumber. So, Madam Speaker, the high cost of living is crushing people. Families, they are finding it difficult to make ends meet. At least the minister agrees. He acknowledges that to the extent that he says, this is not the time for new taxes. And so there are no new taxes in this budget. That is only going so far. But he could do more. In the aftermath, in the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl, it was expected that relief assistance would be provided to those who lost their income and livelihood. And some of that has been provided, as the minister went through in great detail in his budget presentation yesterday, of the income support that was provided to persons who are affected, fishers, farmers, and so forth, persons in the hospitality industry. That was expected. Also, there was assistance, slow in coming, for the recovery and the rebuilding of homes and businesses following the hurricane. But, Madam Speaker, long before Beryl, people across the country were catching hell. No question about that. And were calling on the government for relief. The Beryl relief measures, though welcome, Madam Speaker, they are short-term. The minister himself acknowledges this in his budget presentation. So they can't deal with the ongoing cost of living crisis. Sustained relief is required, as is being done not just here, but in other countries. Even some of the highly developed countries, the rich countries. What needs to be done, Madam Speaker, is put people at the heart of the budget by increasing direct supports, to put more money back in people's pocket so that they could spend it on groceries and buying stuff for their children to go to school and doing necessary repairs on their homes. We have, Madam Speaker, put forward the plans. And sometimes we say things and they, publicly at least, they want to reject the idea and they poo-poo the idea and they might even, traduce us sometimes when you put forward the idea. But it resurfaces at some point under a different name and so forth. But I don't mind. Acronym, yes. But, Madam Speaker, what I said at our convention in Pitibadel last year is that there needs to be a concerted plan to bring relief from the crushing cost of living crisis that people are feeling. And one of the measures that can do that immediately is to reduce the VAT, as we have recommended, from 16% to 13%. That will put money back in people's pocket, ensure that the reduction in prices is passed on directly to the consumer. Also create, as has been done in other countries, it's not rocket science. Countries in the region, in the OECS, VAT-free shopping days at key points in the year, like August or Christmas, to enable families to buy at a lower price and so forth, and make those purchases that they need to send the children back to school, let's say if it's in August, or in December, to prepare for the holiday season. Poor people need to enjoy themselves too, Madam Speaker. They need to celebrate Christmas too. It's not just for people of means. We also, Madam Speaker, recommend, as has been done in other countries in the OECS, that you create an annual bonus system for public servants to ease the cost of living and redress the hardships that they feel from low wages. This will also be extended, Madam Speaker, to persons who want public assistance because they are the most vulnerable. They need some help. And those who are at the lower end of the NIS scale, because as somebody told me the other day, Sister Friday, look, this is what they give me. You know, I can't live on that because in retirement, but that is what they're entitled to under the regulations of the NIS. So it would be good, Madam Speaker, to provide some relief for those persons as well. We need also, Madam Speaker, to review the imports duties on items such as motor vehicles and reduce costs and red tape at the customs to make things more affordable for people. When rising cost prices are brought under control, we can review them again, Madam Speaker, and see what needs to be continued and what not. But of course, I said at Peter Bodell, I'm offering these, and it is my wish, my desire that the government will implement them immediately, because my concern is about the people of the country, and the sooner they benefit from them, the better. And a missed opportunity, for example, in the 2020 general elections, we offered 4.5% interest in student loans as one of the things that we would do in an NDP government. The Prime Minister ridiculed the idea. He says opportunism on the part of the NDP. Can't happen. Last year, in the budget last year, they introduced 4.5% interest for student loans. Just think how much more benefit it could have brought to those students and families if it had been implemented in 2020 as we requested. So don't wait. You don't have to wait till after the election. Take a good idea and run with it. Implement it.
You're welcome.
Madam Speaker, I now turn to some of the aspects of the economy of the country, which, as you know, we have been speaking about in other forums, and which is of utmost importance now that we are at a point post-burial, post-COVID, post-souffre, all of these milestones, Madam Speaker, that we can say, thank God we are here, you know, we are alive. Our country has persevered. Now, maybe it's a chance for us to reset and think in a more creative way, in a bold way outside the box, of ways in which we can transcend our current circumstances and plan for a better and brighter future. Not just more tinkering, Madam Speaker. So, we cannot have a country without a growing economy. The minister says that the expectation is that the economy will grow 4.6% or thereabouts this year. That is better than the 1 or 2% of anemic growth that they used to have, or declines, or negative growth, as the economists call it. But more is needed. We can't go around the world either, just begging for handouts and borrowing because the money is made available. That is not a substitute, Madam Speaker, for economic development. Those funds, when you get grants and so forth, fine, you take them. You get concessional loans with 1%, 2%, and you have a specific project that can generate a return that justifies the borrowing. By all means, you take it. But you don't just do it for the sake of borrowing because the money is available. I'm not suggesting that's what the minister is doing. The point is, however, the continuous borrowing means that it is not sustainable in the long run. The minister acknowledges this, even when he says that the debt is manageable and so forth and it's sustainable. He did say in his own statement that it has constrained the government's activities because it has limited the range of measures that they can introduce and things that they can do to further bring ease to the people of the country and stimulate economic development. So, Madam Speaker, the handouts, they dry up because our friends, they get tired. This is why it's important, as I'm suggesting, that we focus on building a domestic economy with our own people as the actors, not just as bystanders, while others come and do it for us. This is what we're talking about here. But the practice of just basically relying on handouts, that, as I say, it will end. And then we may have to go to less reputable sources or characters to rely on to get those kinds of handouts. Borrowing also makes the national debt too large, and it becomes increasingly burdensome on our people, as it has now. Because they bear more taxes to repay the loans. Because, Madam Speaker, you can't borrow to pay debt. Or maybe you shouldn't. I should say you shouldn't borrow to pay debt. Because what you're doing there is, in the colloquial phrase, you're digging a hole to fill a hole. And in this case, where you're substituting lower interest debt by paying it off with money borrowed at a higher interest, you're just making a deeper and deeper hole. And it may kick the can further and further down the road, but it just compounds the problem in the end. And our country becomes in the grips of the debt unless you can rely on somebody, some friendly government to give debt forgiveness or something of that sort, or that you have some disaster and the World Bank or some facility gives some relief. That we can't count on those things, Madam Speaker. What we need to do is to build our economy. The problem or the problems that we have now in the economy of this country, they have to be the problems of the present government. Good Lord, you've been in government for 23 years, 24 years. You know? They can't continue as they've done over the course of the year to point to the NDP and Mitchell and try to blame them for problems now. That people who are voting or have voted in the last election and will vote this time weren't even born when Mitchell was in office. So you can't continue to use that. They cannot continue, Madam Speaker, to blame NDP and Mitchell and Eustace for low growth, high unemployment, low wages, and declining agriculture. They boast about it, so they must take blame for the mess that it has become. They created the mess. They have brought us to a point, Madam Speaker, in this 2025, where this country is literally falling apart in every aspect that you look at. I will now turn, Madam Speaker, to look at agriculture. You see, I'm talking about building an economy. We have put forward the 4 pillars, Madam Speaker, of the productive sectors of the economy. So now I turn to address agriculture as one of them. Very important one. I listened yesterday as the Minister of Finance to what he had to say about agriculture. It wasn't much, to be honest, but he still found time to praise the visionary leadership of the Minister of Agriculture. And he reiterated the government, their so-called commitment to farmers. He said to farmers, he didn't say to agriculture, to farming, to farmers. Last year, he said agriculture, the farmers, and the fishers. That's in his budget last year at page 7. And I quote, remain at the heart of our national development. But, Madam Speaker, truthfully, these grandiose expressions of support and appreciation of the importance of agriculture, it's not reflected, Madam Speaker, in the budget that the minister presented. There is no plan set out, or maybe the Minister of Agriculture will go rogue and do something himself. But the point is, this budget has no plan to rebuild agriculture. It's the same approach, Madam Speaker. It's essentially a scattershot approach with no real plan for the sectors. And he says, that he loves farmers.
That's true.
How can this be when under 24 years of ULP rule, agriculture has been brought to its knees and farmers have been neglected? In the 2022, according to a World Bank source, agriculture contributed a mere 4.6% of GDP. This was the backbone of the land-owning democracy that was created under James Mitchell and the NDP, that built homes across the country, that allowed people to own motor vehicles and send their children to study at universities and so forth. And here we are now. They have reduced, Madam Speaker, the farmers as though they are welfare case just to be satisfied with handouts. You can't treat farmers like that, man. Farmers are productive, proud people. They want to be able to till the land and to grow for themselves and to market it and then to add more to it. They want to be able to produce for this country and for themselves. And contribute, of course, to our food security. But agriculture, as I said, has suffered under this present administration. Farmers, they have not been central to the government's development plans, though they have been central to their political plans. And the two, Madam Speaker, should never be conflated. They are willing to seek to woo farmers. You will go, they will do all kinds of handouts with tools and implements. If you look in the budget here now, you see there's a lot of description of that. But how this fits into production, marketing of the commodities that are produced, total silence. And that is really where the bottleneck is. That is where the problem in agriculture is. But the farmers, Madam Speaker, they're smarter than that. While many of them gave the government the benefit of the doubt before, when they brought forward other policies, as I said earlier in my presentation, they have seen the gimmicks over and over again. And they won't fall for it. So, Madam Speaker, after 24 years of ULP rule, we have arrived at a point where farmers, they have lost faith in the government because they feel they have been left out of our development plans and for the future of the country. We had consultations, Madam Speaker. We've had consultations with farmers at our headquarters. We brought them in and talked to them and try and find out. We go to the farmers in the fields and talk to them as well to find out what their situation is, to ask for their advice, for their input, what it is that we as government, as representatives, should be doing to represent them better. But they have not done so. Yeah, we've been to the greenhouses at Montreal. You have to ask the minister that. He said they have some plan to have private sector people develop it. I'm not sure. I hear that Reno is storing coconuts in one of the facilities up there. I don't know if that's what he's talking about. Madam Speaker, but what are some of the problems? All of that said. You can't just blame the volcanic eruption and droughts and so forth. We have to plan for these things because that's the context in which we live, you know? So all the plans that we make have to take those things into account. You can't act surprised and say, well, listen, we are set back now because of such and such. Of course they'll have setbacks, but you have to have plans in place to recover and move forward quickly and better. But the biggest problem in the Ministry of Agriculture is a lack of vision and a lack of leadership in the government. There's also, Madam Speaker, the problem of the lack of access to farms because the feeder roads are not maintained and they are not cleared. I asked my colleagues, Madam Speaker, to look at some of these roads and give me some examples and so forth. And to be honest, Madam Speaker, I was so surprised and saddened in a sense by the long list that was presented, because my understanding is that this government over the course of 20-something years, they haven't built new roads, they haven't fixed and maintained the ones that are in existence. So farmers have difficulty reaching to their lands, and it adds costs to the work that they're doing. So we have those problems, Madam Speaker. We had the problem of predial larceny. I didn't hear the minister talk about it in his presentation as to what they were going to do with it. So I expect the Minister of Agriculture, if he speaks this time, will get around to dealing with it. The problems of stray dogs. He had a dogs bill in Parliament the other day, but I don't think it was intended to deal with the farming situation that much. A big problem too, Madam Speaker, is the lack of proper production and marketing system. The people will tell you that. You know, the risk of putting your crops in the ground at one price and then reaping them at a lower price. And then the only person who takes the risk is the farmer. The trafficker will come and buy you at the lower price and sell, and he or she still makes a profit. But the farmer, Madam Speaker, haven't put the stuff in the ground, haven't paid laborers, put the implements and the inputs and so forth to put the stuff in the ground. When they come to sell and the price has fallen, sometimes they have to ask the question, is it worth it to me to go to reap it? So we have to have, Madam Speaker, a proper production system and a marketing system to assist the farmers. We have the problem of aging farmer population. That was acknowledged in last year's budget by the Minister of Finance. But what exactly is being done? There are some small-scale programs that they're talking about trying to attract young people into farming. But seriously, Madam Speaker, this is really, it's tinkering with a problem that is too serious for that to be the modus operandi of the government. We have also the problem, Madam Speaker, of the fact of there is a lack of a comprehensive plan for agriculture. It's certainly nothing in the government, in the presentation of the Minister of Finance, suggests that there is this comprehensive plan. What we have, there are different elements of various things that they intend to see done, and how they are all connected is that in the end, I suppose it will all come together, kumbaya, and we'll have production. But it don't happen so. You have to have a specific plan. You have to put your intellect and your sinews and everything together to bring about the result that you want. You can't just throw something out there and say, and let me see what happens when it comes back. So every Monday morning, as I said, he took me to task to that last time, and I said every Monday morning you come up with a different commodity to export, whether it's fish or ackee or whatever. But anyway, Madam Speaker, we also have the problem is that we don't really have a good sense of what's happening in agriculture because there has been no agricultural census under this present government for the whole time they have been in office. So what are some of the things, Madam Speaker, that we can do? Because as I tell you, I'm not just here to critique government. We have looked at this problem. We have plans, we have ideas, we have solutions that we put forward to some of these problems. And the government, they will do well to listen and to be humble and say, okay, this makes sense, let's implement it. Change your name if you want. So, Madam Speaker, we have to defeat a road problem, for example, access to farm. Big problem, because it adds to costs. It discourages production because, it makes sense. I don't have to detail it in minutiae. The point is that we have to implement, this resolution, a comprehensive national access feeder roads program. You have to extend some, rehabilitate the others to make sure that we have it. But you have to have a comprehensive plan to do it. Don't just pick out one here and one there because it draws your fancy in that particular time. And the idea is you're doing it because you have a plan to redevelop agriculture. And this is a component of the plan. It's not about doing something for a constituency here, doing something in my constituency there. It's a plan to rebuild agriculture, and this is an important component of it. Again, as a matter of making sure that it's done, establish a quarterly, or you could say more, but not less, a quarterly farm roads clearing and cleaning program in an effort to maintain the feeder roads. We go around the roads in the communities and cut the bush and so on by the side and things, but we don't do a similar thing for the feeder roads and for the farmers. And this, Madam Speaker, is important for production, for livelihoods, and that we treat it as though somehow it is outside the scope of what ought to be done. I said, Madam Speaker, that the problem of predial larceny is really crippling farmers. I visited a farmer in Richmond Park area some time ago. And the story, you listen to it, and sometimes if you think it's not, if it wasn't so serious, it would seem funny. That I went to the farm, and you see there's some area where the dasheen was all taken out and so forth. It's gone. They take them and they're gone. Enough to make a bag and they're gone. And all you see is the area where they operated. And then next week, they may come back and go somewhere else. And all the efforts that farmer made to protect the crop failed. And so I asked, well, why don't you go to the police? And it was like, are you serious? Nothing will be done. So the problem of predial larceny, Madam Speaker, is a serious one. And we have adopted a zero-tolerance policy to this problem. The upholder is as bad as a thief when they come in this. So people who buy this stuff and selling them at second-rate prices, they're the ones who should also be held accountable. We have the laws in place, We could refine them to deal with this problem of predial larceny, and we should review them and make sure that that is done. We have to review the damage assessment, how we assess the damage that is done for crops that are stolen and that are damaged by dogs, stray dogs, so that farmers can be entitled to compensation. For the predial larceny, Madam Speaker, we've been talking about this and waiting on the regular police to deal with it and so forth. But we need to go beyond that now. Show farmers that we're serious, that we are there for justice for them. But more than that, we're there because, as I said, this is an important component of our economy. We can't build an economy without agriculture. So we need to establish a predial larceny unit within the Ministry of Agriculture in coordination with the police. And so that you have a unit that is tasked with dealing with this very serious and particular problem. It's left up just simply to the officer in a particular district and so forth, as the farmers will tell you, they don't come. Or if they come, where's a hand in a bunch of plantain or a few watermelons or sack of dasheen, you got more. They don't give it the level of attention and seriousness is required. So, Madam Speaker, that is something that we need to do. We can also, Madam Speaker, to enhance, and we will detail this in elsewhere when there is more additional time, to enhance the proper production and marketing system. Madam Speaker, we have facilities that can be activated. You know, the palletization plants in Langley Park and in La Croix and Belmont as buying depots for agricultural produce. They can facilitate degrading, the collection and degrading of commodities, Madam Speaker, and packaging so that they are in a state, a ready-to-sale state, for sale state to supermarkets and traffickers. Right now, Madam Speaker, too much is left on the farmers to have to do everything for themselves. All of these things, you know, institute, show that farming, that we have standards, and that the reason that they're being implemented is so that they can help farmers to get, to raise the quality of their production, but also to get better prices. So have a certification system that may be monitored either by the Bureau of Standards or by some other entity that will help in this role to ensure that the crops that are produced meets what is acceptable standards. And also to encourage that farmers to meet that you have a grading system and you basically reward the farmers by better prices as they meet the top standards. These are things, Madam Speaker, I believe that the farmers will recognize to say, well, listen, the government is seriously interested in doing something for farming. We know that the challenges are great, but at least we can see that they are seriously interested in trying to do something for the farmers of this country. The livestock production, Madam Speaker, under the BAM initiative, banana accompanying measures that was done by the European Union, $37 million given to this country to diversify around bananas. One of the things my colleague mentioned that was built, that came out of that, was the greenhouses at Montreal, which as we know now are derelict. You know, they're not being used. So they wasted the European people money. Not more than that, they have tantalized farmers with the prospect of having something new and different and productive, and they have not delivered on it. That's cruel, Madam Speaker. But the point is that the livestock production, Madam Speaker, we need to have an abattoir. That was supposed to be part of the BAM initiative. It was never built. To encourage the slaughtering of animals in proper conditions, but also in producing proper cuts of meat and so forth, so that the farmers can also get better value for different qualities of the meat that they produce. Madam Speaker, for livestock, we can implement a breeding program to support grass-fed production and to export livestock. Not just here, but, you know, outside the region as well. For me, however, I would prefer, Madam Speaker, first and foremost, that we satisfy the local demands here and that we make it so that we have good quality stuff available, and the farmers and the butchers work hand in hand to provide this very important part of our diet and food security. And finally, Madam Speaker, it is time that we create a separate Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Fisheries. These are two important productive activities in our economy. And the Ministry of Fisheries, for the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. Fisheries basically has been treated over the years almost like a desk in the Ministry of Agriculture. When in fact, the potential for economic benefit from the fishing industry is limitless almost. And certainly, we are only at the beginning stages here of it. And so we need to have a Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, separate, dealing with the revitalization of agriculture and dealing in a granular way, in a very involved way with the farmers in reviving agriculture. But also, we need to have a Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Conservation. So we have both things going hand in hand. Utilization of the fish stock, and at the same time the conservation to ensure that it's there for future generations. That, Madam Speaker, the time for that has come. And so, of course, if they don't do it, I'll do it in government. Madam Speaker, in the interest of time, I'll move on with, there is also, we have the aging farmer population. Big problem. I just want to suggest that in one way, we need to bring agricultural science back into the curriculum, not just in the places where they grow and farm, but widely, because agriculture is an important part of our economy, but it's also an important part of the culture of our people. And so that is something, Madam Speaker, that I heard that the School of Asante Bay, that is something that they're talking about in one of the programs that they will implement, but it needs to be done more broadly, Madam Speaker. This is not commercial farming, but it is farming. It's important for food security. It's important to health for people. We need also to have a much more concerted approach on the part of the Ministry of Agriculture to assist homeowners with backyard gardens and so forth. This is so vitally important for health. And I remember, as I was growing up, we used to have all kinds of things growing. You could go out and you're cooking beans and rice. You go in the garden and you pick the beans. You had okra, you could go and pick them. You had corn and peas. And this is in Bekwe, which is not known for agriculture. But now you have to go to the supermarket and buy your peas in a can. Even tomatoes sometimes, $20 a pound, somebody tell me in some place. Broccoli at $35 a pound in some place. I mean, think of how much can be done. But you can't do it on your own. We have fruit trees that are dying. Plum trees, I know in my own family in Beck, we have plum trees that they have infection and so forth. You say, well, okay, what can we do? You don't just take note of it. You say, okay, this is a problem. This is a source of vitamin C or whatever. It's also something people enjoy. Let us have a unit, the point I'm making, in the Ministry of Agriculture. I know that some time ago there was a grant from, I think it was USAID, where they were going around and assisting persons with backyard gardening. I have not heard anything about it since. But that is a very important part of food security, to produce fresh vegetables and food and fruits and so forth for your own use and maybe for your neighbors as well. I have a neighbor, she grows these long beans, and every so often she'll bring them over. My wife likes them because you don't get them very much here in the supermarkets. Yeah? They call them Bodhi, I think. But these are things, Madam Speaker, that we can do. And it just takes a little willingness to be able to say, okay, let's try and help people to become more self-sufficient with food that we know that they can grow, and task the Ministry of Agriculture will do so. Madam Speaker, I come to the final aspect that I want to talk about with respect to the agriculture. The absence of an agricultural census. Madam Speaker, this was raised many times. I spoke about it a bit in my presentation on the estimates last week. Madam Speaker, the importance of it is this. Agricultural data is needed to monitor the existing agricultural and food supply conditions and to provide accurate and reliable information to help government and other users in the process of short-term and medium-term planning and decision-making in the agricultural sector. And, just think about it. A census, you have comprehensive information, uniform information that is provided to the decision makers. And it's impartial information, it's reliable information that you can use and say, okay, this is what is revealed, and so therefore let us plan on the basis of that. So, and the census, it is fundamental to the agricultural statistics system. How you can function and you don't know where you are, how you can know where you're going. Madam Speaker, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they've had censuses in the past. There was a census done in 1946. I'm talking here about agricultural census, not population census. There was one done in 1961. There was one done in 1972. And under the NDP government, a census was done in 1985, 86, and then there was another one done in 2000. In 24 years in government, not one has been done by the present administration. 17 and a half years of the NDP in office and 2 agricultural censuses produced. And that, Madam Speaker, those years are regarded as golden age in agriculture in this country. As I said, exhibitions where we talk of bananas, green gold, and the countryside was transformed with housing and so forth. And, Madam Speaker, the NDP did this. And we had, during this time, you had the production increase and so forth. And ordinary people, unlike in colonial times where the estates basically controlled the production and everybody else worked as laborer for them, here, ordinary people benefited from the increased production and sales because the NDP also had within that a policy that made land accessible to ordinary people as farmers, a landowning democracy. That's how we empower people. In 24 years in office, the ULP has done nothing. So last year budget, the Minister of Finance said, and I quote, Budget 24 will allocate $300,000 to an agriculture and fisheries census. And then, a usual highfalutin expectation. He said the agricultural census will go well. This is the Minister of Finance, not the Minister of Agriculture. The agricultural census will go well beyond who is growing what. It will help connect producers to markets, identify roadblocks, and capitalize on the burgeoning opportunities for farmers and fishers. That was not done. In fact, Madam Speaker, in answer to a question to Senator Bruce last week in the estimates debate, the Minister of Agriculture said that the census wasn't done because of Hurricane Beryl. But he forgot that in the estimates document itself, it said at page 367 of the estimates that the reason why they put forward why the census wasn't done was because the population and housing census was delayed. I don't know what the two have to do with it, but the point is that, come on, which is it? Which one is a more palatable excuse, or is it the real reason for the delay? Well, I don't know which will suffice. But they boast about how long they're in power, as I said, longer than any government. But I always say, the proof is in the pudding here, because they've been in power long and they still didn't do anything about the agricultural census. What matters then, therefore, is not how long you're in power. What matters most is how well you use the power that you have. So in 10 years, you can accomplish what this administration says to do. In 2 terms, NDP government had built the resort down at Canawan. Took 24 years before Sandals came under this administration. So the time, what you do, Madam Speaker, is really, what you do with the time is what's most important. How can a government seriously plan to develop agriculture when they don't have reliable and comprehensive data on which to rely? What I believe, Madam Speaker, the sad truth is, I don't think they want an agricultural census. That will reveal too much. It will reveal the neglect that agriculture has suffered, and it will reveal that the farmers of this country have been brought to their knees under this administration. The farmers deserve better, Madam Speaker. But we see from this budget, 2025, as I said, read it yourself. There's nothing in it other than to say there's some implements they're going to hand out here. They're going to do certain small programs here, but there's no real overarching approach as to how we are going to make agriculture. And that's the real challenge, Madam Speaker. That's the real challenge, because we talk about, since the time the NDP was in office, how do you diversify around bananas? How do you reinvent agriculture in a way that is not plantation production, but is still economically viable? That question we have not answered. The New Democratic Party, when they were in office, Mitchell built the Otley Hall Marina and shipyard as another source of economic activity to help to carry the country forward. The present government, they have neglected it. I've talked about this ad nauseum in this parliament over and over again. And the minister had promised over and over again, oh, we're going to do something about it because the potential is there. And when the NDP developed that facility, it was not just as a project. It was part of the diversification of the economy. That's how important it was. But they have ignored it entirely. It is now rusting down at Utley Hall. Anybody who goes to see that will be shocked, you know? And somebody has to be held responsible for dereliction of duty and when it comes to that facility. But I get back to the central point I was making. And that is, Madam Speaker, the present administration, they do not want to see, they don't want the people to see what the situation truly is with agriculture. In the same way that they buried the poverty report in 2018, and they didn't want people to see that indigence has increased from 11%, from 3% to 11%, and that poverty had increased from 31% to 36%, and that in Barley, poverty was over 60%, and that in my own constituency, poverty had doubled. They didn't want people to see those things. So you're yeah, go read it. Go read yourself. I know you don't believe in it because you say it was somehow tainted. I don't know how it could be tainted. It's your study. You just don't like what it says. And we are here now in 2025, Madam Speaker. We don't even have the population census done. You know? That will be for, anyway, somebody else might deal with that. So that's the point, Madam Speaker. That's where we are with respect to agriculture. So, Madam Speaker, we have done 2 hours, right? Thank you. Madam Speaker, I wish now to turn to roads and infrastructure. It wasn't this way I had organized it in the presentation, but I think that's how the minister has it, so we'll go with that. Roads and infrastructure. To put it lightly, Madam Speaker, the public infrastructure of this country has gone to the dogs. It is really, the roads in particular. Yesterday, the minister outlined in detail the many road projects that he said they're working on. And he seemed, very satisfied with himself because he was delaying, he was outlining this, oh, we did this and we did this and we started this and we spent so much money and so forth. But most of them, as you will see from the list that he said, they're not new roads. They are roads that are being repaired. They're existing roads that are being repaired. And such a long list would not have been necessary, Madam Speaker. Think about this. If the government had been repairing them all along. So you create a crisis, Madam Speaker. You set the house on fire, you bring the hose, and you want somebody to applaud you for it. 24 years of neglected roads all over the country. And the minister, he wants us as a Hail Caesar. Well, maybe not Hail Caesar, but Hail Camelo. Because, fixing the roads. Well, as I said, they should have maintained them all around. At present, no. Never mind all that you say you did, and that you're doing, and that you're planning. The bad roads are still mashing up people's vehicles. The suspension of people's vehicles, the tires, the wheels. Damaging. And I said this, Madam Speaker, when the government, it's an indirect tax on the vehicle users of the roads in this country. Because when the government don't fix the roads, you have to fix your car. And at the same time, they're charging more and more for registration fees and licensing fees and so forth. And this is something, Madam Speaker, that has gone on for far too long. The minister says no, that they're going to fix them. But as I said, no matter what he says, anybody can tell you that the roads in the country are the worst that they've ever been. And this is not something, you can't hide this, Madam Speaker. This stuff I talked about, at the beginning, this stuff I talked about at the beginning of my presentation, about the finances of the country and so forth. That takes some peeling back of layers to expose. The roads, however, all you have to do is walk out your house and you see it. The other day, I was on the harbor in Port Elizabeth. There's a cruise ship in. I see a fella, visitor. He walking and his visitors and he looking around. And then the foot step in a hole, the man went down straight on the ground. Bruising knee. He get up right in front, the gas station area there. And I just look and I thought, geez, it's a hole there in the road. Don't take much to do. You know what happened, Madam Speaker? Somebody complained. I saw it and I complained to some people who were there. But that same day, somebody went and they put cement in the hole and fixed it. So it tells me it's not just a matter of, you can't do it. It's just there is no attention to these things. There's no caring. There's an autopilot kind of approach to the government, and things just continue to go from bad to worse, including the roads, and continue to fall apart. Everyone on this side of the house, Madam Speaker, and the colleagues on that side of the house, too, if they're being honest, will tell you that the roads in their areas are worse than they are anywhere else. Everybody will say, I have the worst roads in my constituency. And you hear me talk about those in mine for a lot in this honorable house. So I will let my colleagues take the stage with respect to that. How did they get so bad? 24 years, Madam Speaker, of ULP neglect. So I say to the minister, you say you're going to fix them, that you're going to spend so much money. Then I say fix them and fix them quickly. But don't expect. Fix them well. Yes. Well, listen, don't talk to him about well, okay? Don't talk to him about well. There's a piece of road in Mount Pleasant coming down from my house. They fixed that road during the election last time. Madam Speaker, within less than 2 years, the road dropping, the surface just washing away every time you have to go. People, when you're driving it, just gravel. Now it's reached down to the BRC. And this was built 4 years ago. So don't tell me about well. It's you guys who built it. Yeah. But the point is, Madam Speaker, they definitely need to be fixed. And the sooner they are done, the better. Because it's long overdue. Madam Speaker, I want to say something about ports and jetties because the minister mentioned something about them as well. I couldn't believe my ears yesterday when the minister tried to make us out to be villains of this peace when it comes to the ports. He made it suggest that we were opposed to the port in Kingston when he knows full well that this is politely is a lie. We supported, Madam Speaker, the minister built up a straw man about, what the passage there, boy? Amen. At page 31, the minister, he tried to make it out as though we opposed the port, that we're so backward and so forth. When in fact we came to this house and we supported the bill to borrow the money to build the port. We supported it. I think they wanted us to oppose it, so that they could draw this contrast. But we supported it. So you got to stop lying about those things, Minister. The people of this country know that we are dutiful in the exercise of our roles and that we will always do what is in the best interest of the country. So we supported that loan. In fact, Madam Speaker, I was at a function some time ago. I can't remember if it was at Mr. Cummings, your affair in Central Kingston or somewhere, but I ran into a supporter and he chastised me for supporting this loan because he thought that he couldn't understand why it was going to cost so much. But I explained to him that the support was the right thing to do, and he still wasn't convinced. So we agreed to disagree on this. So, Minister, don't use this as some sort of convenient whipping post for us in the New Democratic Party because, in fact, we did not oppose it. We supported the project. We want to see the project done. In fact, one of my campaign boasts here, Mr. Speaker, as I go around the country, I say they start the port, I will finish it. You know, I mean, so you can't say that that's the case. So don't, instead of peddling those lies, Madam Speaker, about the opposition, what he should do is he should tell us how ashamed he is about the poor state of the jetty in Canaan. Madam Speaker, for years, I don't remember, has been talking about this and has urged the government to repair the jetty in Canaan for the ferries when they come in. What you have there is a temporary thing that has been there for how long? 20 years? And you have a container that is there at the end. It's not paved. The surface, Madam Speaker, is dirt. When it rains, it creates a stagnant pool. When it dries out, because it's very fine dust, it blows on your clothes and so forth. It is a hazard. It is too narrow. It is too small. It is simply, Madam Speaker, unacceptable that after so many years of advocating on behalf of the people of Canaan, the member for Southern Grenadines cannot say to them, listen, the government has listened to your pleas. They have seen that this is necessary and they are going to deliver on it. I don't know what the minister is going to say because I haven't, well, he said that he's going to do some work on infrastructure in the Grenadines. Hopefully, if it's not, I don't remember seeing this, but if it's not, that he can add it because it's timely, it's overdue. Madam Speaker, we can go beyond just simply the matter of repairs. In Union Island, of course, the jetties there is, I mean, it has exceeded. The traffic has now exceeded. The demand has outstripped the facilities that are there. And similarly, the same is happening in Port Elizabeth. You know, I know that you have to repair the port in Kingstown, and the sooner that gets done, it's better because the constriction and the terrible congestion that happens there is bad for business. You know, because when the ferries come, there's just simply too much congestion to be able to get things done efficiently. But yes, there needs to be a plan, Madam Speaker. Again, this is part of the economic development. We can't have a country without a functioning economy. You can't have a functioning economy without proper communication and transportation network. And this is an important part of it. And certainly in the Southern Grenadines, in Union Island, where you could only have one ferry basically docking at a time, you know, or I think the fast ferry could go in sideways. That's about it. You know, it's totally, the uses have outgrown the facilities that are there. And similarly in Beckwith as well. So that, Madam Speaker, is something that the Minister ought to turn his attention to. But he hasn't, of course. He prefers to talk about things that are not true in respect of the facility here in Kingstown. Madam Speaker, I will just say this, not for any great discussion, but I'm hoping as well. We look at Kingstown, especially now that you have the tourism season going. And Kingstown really is, and Port Elizabeth similarly, as two of the major urban centers in the country, they are in a state of disrepair, Madam Speaker. They look really run down and forgotten and woebegone. And we need to have, you have to really imagine what Kingstown can look like. Not just for visitors, but for us as our people. You know, when a cruise ship comes in, for example, you see the visitors, they are jostling with the carts and the taxis and the bus and the van and the people and so forth, and the place is congested and crowded. And when you come off the ferry and you come down, you almost, sometimes you can't get in and out. And, you know, I said to somebody, you know, imagine what will happen when the tunnel on the King Garden gets there. You know, you can't get out now. I mean, honestly, Madam Speaker. But the point is, reality says that we need to do something about Kingstown. We have a plan and we will talk about it. My colleague, Central Kingstown, will talk about it. As to how we develop that and redevelop Port Elizabeth as well. For our own use, but also to make them more attractive and livable for us and for our visiting friends. Madam Speaker, I wish now to talk about Let me see if I should do that one. Yes, Madam Speaker, Hurricane Beryl has been discussed in this Parliament, quite rightly so, by members on the side of the House, members on the government side, because it was the most important incident or most important thing that happened in the country last year. It was last July, it ripped through the Caribbean at an earlier time than we expect, causing massive damage. This was powerful evidence, Madam Speaker, of the reality of climate change. This is what the scientists tell us. And we all believe in climate change. I heard the minister yesterday talking as if, the NDP and the other side, they are deniers of climate change. Again, come on. You're picking all these slender things to try and make us look bad when nobody believes that. That's nonsense. Who could not believe in climate change when you live in the Caribbean? Beaches that I used to play cricket on as a teenager, Madam Speaker, you had to put retaining wall in the water 3 feet deep as you try to walk past them. Of course, we understand what the problems of climate change are. Climate change is it is an existential threat to many around the world and to us here in the Caribbean. And so, we have to accept that the Hurricane Beryl was a tragic reminder of the dangers of climate change, how it can affect us. Now that the cleanup has been done and the response must focus on the rebuilding process. I was there, Madam Speaker, in the immediate aftermath of the hurricane disaster, and I've been back several times to Union Island, Canouan. But, there's still, Madam Speaker, so much more to be done. The rebuilding process, we have to admit, Madam Speaker, has not gone well, particularly in Union Island. The minister yesterday, they seem to be upset when you say, well, okay, people are complaining and so forth. But in fact, you got to go listen to the people. You can't stand up here and say, well, listen, I have done this, I have done that, that's enough, so people should be happy and satisfied. Listen to the people. Their homes are the ones that have been affected. And they're the ones who are displaced. And they're the ones, Madam Speaker, who have to put up with hardship and all of this stuff that, every day, and it seems unending. And they would hope that by now they'd be able to get the repairs done to their homes and get back in. The frustration has overflowed among the people in Union Island, Madam Speaker. And the planned government assistance has been slow in getting to the people. Not just there, but in parts of the mainland and certainly my own constituency in Northern Grenadines. There are homes that were flattened there. There were roofs that were damaged, but most of the people with damaged roofs, they put them on themselves, because they say they can't wait for government to give them the assistance or for anybody else to come and do it. But they still are going to have permanent repairs, because what they did is just basically to put a roof back on, some of them using the same galvanized they used before that were blown off, or they used resources that they had, or family members helped them, and so that they could get back in. Private entities, of course, we know have stepped in to the breach and helped with considerable effort to move the building process forward, and we got to be grateful to them. And this was done in Canouan and in Union Island now. But there is a need for urgency, Madam Speaker. People want to see that we here who are sitting comfortably here and go in our homes and so on, turn on our lights and can cook and done and sleep in our beds, that we understand that they are still in a disaster that they have not yet recovered from. That there's an urgency that does not seem to reflect that condition. And that is what they ask of us, Madam Speaker. Don't forget, we are still in a disaster area. This is not a 9-to-5 kind of solution to the problem. We have to be putting efforts 24/7 to get people back in their homes, get the children back in their schools, and get the businesses in those communities back up. We have to. If we don't get the businesses back up, Madam Speaker, then the communities don't come back. Because the businesses are important to provide services, but also to provide jobs. All we ask, Madam Speaker, on behalf of the people, and my colleague, I'm sure will reiterate that, is that the urgency be put into the process. Last week, my colleague, the Honorable Terence Oliver, spoke eloquently about the situation from a perspective that in this house only he alone can give. because it is only he who feels it, knows it. So, Madam Speaker, it was truly disgraceful when members on the government side mocked his pain and sought for petty reasons to belittle his testimony in this House. Terence wasn't asking for anyone for anything. And he certainly wasn't expecting the government to give him a bedroom door lock. He was merely asking, Madam Speaker, he was making the point that 6 months after burial, he was living in one room in his house with no front door. He said that. And the door to the room where he slept, it can't close properly. So he had to put a chair against the door to close it. They come and say the man like he can't buy lock, he won't get lock from government. Madam Speaker, that was sinking very low. Sinking very low. Madam Speaker, the member for Southern Grenadines, he was trying to secure the door so he could get a night's rest, you know. So the elements won't come in. He could represent himself. He did very well last time. But I felt it was necessary for me to say that, Madam Speaker. He was not seeking your help for anything. And he certainly wasn't begging anyone for a stupid door lock. So, Madam Speaker, I won't say any more on Beryl. She caused a lot of harm, but so many things that she's blamed for in this House, Madam Speaker, surely they're questionable. And so I will settle for the words of my colleagues last week because they were very eloquent and poignant. I do agree, however, with the Minister on this matter of climate change, that the international community, especially in industrialized nations, who are the worst carbon emitters, that they are not living up to the bargain and contributing what is needed to help with this problem. Vulnerable countries need greater financial assistance to mitigate against the effect of climate change. I agree that collective advocacy is needed and that it is needed urgently. You know, we got hit with Beryl last year. First time in my lifetime that we got a direct hit from a hurricane. That is not to say it will wait for that length of time for it to happen again. And there's no fairness or justice in it. It doesn't mean that because you get hit this year that you're going to be spared next year. Nature can sometimes be rather cruel. The point is that we have to be prepared, Madam Speaker, for the next event. And let's hope that it doesn't happen or that it doesn't happen for a long time to come. But when it does, Madam Speaker, we have to be prepared. And so this collective advocacy for assistance for climate mitigation financing and for recovery, those things, Madam Speaker, we need to do urgently. And I commend the Minister in his efforts to do so with colleagues in the OECS and CARICOM, and of course in the Small Island Developing States, the initiatives that are used to push the richer countries, the developed countries, the one who are the worst offenders and sometimes the least affected. We are disproportionately affected by climate change here in the region. And so we have to do our part as well. What do we do in order to show that we are basically on the side of protecting the future, even though we are small emitters, that we can do as well to reduce even our footprint. And this is why last week when I asked the question of the Minister of Energy about the use of solar power here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I was a bit disappointed with the answer because it was kind of technical and so forth. I want to see, Madam Speaker, that we say as a government, listen, in 5 years' time we want to go green. You know, and task VINLEC and the Energy Unit to say, make it happen. What are the roadblocks? What are the bottlenecks? and so forth. Let's find out what they are, because there's energy all around us. How can we make this work for us? And I use the example of Mustique, where they're moving towards that. To most of the energy produced, they're using solar and storage of battery and so forth, as a microcosm of something that they ask the question how it can be scaled up here. But certainly, Madam Speaker, we have to be bold in doing that and figure out, not just for the planet's sake, but also for our own, because, as we know, fossil fuels, oil and gas and so forth, that's a very volatile market. And you have a situation where there's crisis somewhere and suddenly the price goes up and we feel a burden. So that'll give us some energy independence as well. So those efforts, Madam Speaker, need to be accelerated. Now, Madam Speaker, I commended the Minister of Education last budget for, it seemed like a small thing, but he filled out all the boxes and presented the information necessary for the budget, for the estimates document, especially under the section that dealt with adult and continuing education. But there is more, Madam Speaker, to be critical of than to be praiseworthy of in this budget. And I will point out some, because I told you that's part of my job. The Minister of Finance, he declares this to be an education budget, and that his government is an education government. Isn't that so? Yeah, he said that. Let me see, I can't remember the page, but anyway, you're not going to dispute that because it'll give him, quote him as it was. Anyway, we shall take a closer look, Madam Speaker, and others will see if he can maintain his boast. But first, some perspective. One of the gravest acts of injustice committed by any government against its workers in this country was done by the ULP government when they fired teachers. When they fired the teachers, public servants, police, healthcare workers, and other public servants, under their misguided COVID vaccine mandate. I repeat, that's one of the gravest acts and hardship that was committed on those workers. And some of them still continue to suffer today, Madam Speaker. The Milton Cato Labour government had tear-gassed teachers during their strike in 1975 and suffocated Kingstown with tear gas. That, Madam Speaker, remains a searing moment or event in our history, and it's commemorated year after year by the Teachers Union to this day. And this year, I expect, being the 50th anniversary of that terrible event, they may increase the scale of their celebration or commemoration. Celebration is not the right word. Madam Speaker, let me see if I can find it. Renwick Rose wrote an article about that. And this is what he had to say, Madam Speaker. That is about the tear gassing. He says, this is in 2023. He had indicated that some of the leaders of the union had been arrested. He said, but worse, and I'm quoting him here. Yeah, he said, worse was yet to come on November 14th, 1975. And he has it in brackets. He says, Tear Gas Friday. Well, not me. I had nothing to do with it. Tear Gas Friday, as it became known, when the police launched a savage attack on a peaceful teachers' march, arresting the top leadership of the union and wickedly covering Kingstown with tear gas. Never before or since was such repression experienced here. It baffles me to up to this day, up to today, how politicians who ordered such a vicious assault could be considered for national hero status. This was another ULP, not ULP, not a Labour government, Madam Speaker. We must remember too, Madam Speaker, that this ULP government refused to lift a finger to help 3 teachers, Elvis Daniel of blessed memory, Addison Bash Thomas, and Kenroy Johnson, after they had relied on a promise made by the government in a collective agreement with the teachers' union, that teachers could contest elections, and if they failed to win, they could get their jobs back. The teachers had relied on that promise, Madam Speaker. They had done all they could. They had hoped to win, but if they didn't, they wanted to go back to the classroom because that was their first profession. They had tremendous experience. But they were not taken back. The teachers had to take this Labour government to court and to win justice in the Court of Appeal. In other words, it took the Court of Appeal to lift its finger. And in fact, it blasted the government in that judgment to help the teachers because justice required it. The other day we were debating the bill to allow public servants to go to contest elections and then to return to their positions if they are not successful. And that bill came to the Parliament some time ago. We supported it. And I read from that decision of the court in respect of these 3 teachers. And they were ordered to be compensated by the government for having been treated in this way. What I've heard, Madam Speaker, is that the union who took them to court still, the winners, they haven't still been paid the cost. That's what I was told. The legal fees that were ordered that they should be paid, the cost that should be paid by the court that the government hasn't paid it yet. If they haven't, then they've been delinquent. They should pay it up. Now, Madam Speaker, teachers and other public servants, that is 271 of them, who were fired on the government's vaccine mandate, also had to seek justice in court and won at the High Court. The court ruled that the teachers, that they didn't leave their jobs and that they were terminated, that they were entitled to be reinstated with their full benefits. That, Madam Speaker, is still being appealed by the government. It's not sub judice if you speak about it in a certain way. I'm reading from the judgment. How could that be sub judice? It's silly. So, Madam Speaker, the hardship of the victims continues. The public plea is that the people be returned to their jobs. It is time, Madam Speaker, that the victimization of the teachers and public servants under this government, under its draconian vaccine mandate, be stopped. The government doesn't have to wait for a decision of the Court of Appeal to do the right thing. They can end it now and treat the people who have been affected fairly. I can tell you, an NDP government will end that suffering. And the affected public servants, they will be reinstated, Madam Speaker, with full benefits as the High Court ordered. As we have said in the past, the public servants, they don't have to wait, Madam Speaker. They don't have to wait for any order from the government because they never left their jobs. That's what the court said. So the day after the government change, you could return to your work. We will work out the compensation matters that the court says they're entitled to afterwards. So, Madam Speaker, whatever the government does in education will always be tainted by this shameful treatment of the teachers, as I've described above. So, where do they go as a ministry or as a government to seek redemption? In the education system. What is the highlight, the bright spots? One of the things, Madam Speaker, that have been particularly interesting is the role of technical and vocational education. We have noted this and called for a radical approach to technical and vocational education training in this country. The minister said over a year ago on radio that he recognized the need to do so. He said, I think I have a quote here. This is from the Searchlight newspaper. I mentioned it last time. This is quoting him, Madam Speaker, just to set the context of what I'm going to say with respect to technical and vocational education. Because he sounded like, there was an epiphany, and that somehow it was heartfelt. He said, and what we need today, I'm quoting him, is to recognize the new society that we are now living in. And accept that the education system, which was basically formulated to deal with a past society, the old society, it is no longer, let us say, totally relevant to the developmental needs that we have identified that will transform our society and enhance persons' living standards. I don't think anybody could disagree with that. Yeah. And he goes on to say, and all basically have come to the conclusion that the education system, as we have it, especially in the English-speaking Caribbean, is too much based in the traditional grammar school model that was utilized in England, with a heavy emphasis on academic training, and there is, in fact, a weakness where skills are concerned. That is a recognition, Madam Speaker. And he said, essentially, that they've been on the wrong course. So the point is, how is that reflected in his stewardship now of the education system? What has he done to reflect, to implement, essentially, this realization that he says that we knew before, but suddenly he has said that the time has come for us to say it publicly and to even admit that they've been on the wrong course for the last 23 years. Madam Speaker, and I'll go into this in some detail, just to reflect, you see, because there is nothing, I would say in summary, there's nothing in the estimates and in the budget to indicate that there is a recognition of this, there's an implementation of this recognition by the minister that we need to change course and we need to give more emphasis and resources to technical and vocational education. Just listen up, you'll learn something. As I noted in the estimates debate, Madam Speaker, there is nothing in the budget that shows any real shift in the education to give serious attention to TVET. This is evident in the allocations of key program actions set out in the estimates of page 281. And I'll just read it for the sake of verification. Page 281 of the estimates. That's the wrong one. Yeah, if you look at page 281, Madam Speaker, you will see that they have full-time students, 188. There's some 280 students that are participating in programs. We have also at page, the key program actions, if they You look at the top of the page, it says, continue to improve the infrastructure to deliver TVET programs in North Leeward Technical Institute by September 25th. And to begin preliminary work in a new technical institutes in Mariquah. Collaborate with the youth in the pilot TVET project, apprenticeship program in Barley and the Anglican school, targeting 40 students. The point is, Madam Speaker, these are the kinds of things that have been added incrementally to the programs over the years by the minister. But if you look also, so it doesn't really show any shape. It is also evident in the recurrent expenditure at page 282. This is just following on. You will see, Madam Speaker, that the total went from $4.4 million in 2024 to $4.6 million in 2025. An increase of 4.492, 4.4656. So it's an increase of $164,000. $164,410,000. So it's a small, tiny increase. But that increase, Madam Speaker, goes towards personal emoluments and wages. They account for $90,000 and $74,000 respectively. So there were no new positions. So it doesn't really show that there's any ramping up of TVET. At page 283, we see, Madam Speaker, where technical and vocational education, they have the staff positions. You look down the list here, Kingston Technical Institute had 16 in 2024, and in 25 the same. Georgetown, 15 and 15. Layou, 1 and 1. Barley, 12 and 12. Camden Park, 23 and 23. Peter Bedell, how many? Well, that's not done yet. 8 and 8, yes. So there's a total, Madam Speaker, of 75 positions. So there's no addition. It's the same incremental approach to technical and vocational education. Despite the grand promises of the minister, the approach is basically the same. There is, Madam Speaker, no plan and no investment to make the type of changes that are needed right now to correct the ship of education and to put it on the right course. What is needed is not mere tinkering or more of the same, Madam Speaker. This is really an important part. The minister said that yesterday in his budget presentation, we have an unemployment situation in the country where 41% of young people are unemployed. Well, that's what you want to say, 35? 22? That suits you better. Well, all right, even if it's 22, still a lot of people. But the point is that reputable institution says 41%. And then you have the general population, 26% unemployment. And the minister says there's a tight labor situation in the country. Yeah? Yeah, that's the point, is that the labor, the market basically is requiring skills, obviously, is what you're saying, that we don't have. Only 5% unemployment, which is nonsense. But the point is this, Madam Speaker. The point is the system. We need to have a true revolution in education by making education system more relevant to our times. I think this is what the minister was pointing to. But I don't know whether he doesn't have the clout in the ministry to sit down and say, listen, guys, we recognize that this is important. We have all these things that are happening in the economy. We need to get jobs for our young people. We have to retool our education system to deliver programs that are relevant to our market conditions and that they will be able to utilize. So, Madam Speaker, let us raise the standard and the profile of technical and vocational education to make it attractive to all students. It can't be seen as a stigmatized program for dropouts and at-risk young people, which is what they basically have been presenting it as for most of the time. A bold new approach is needed. We must produce highly skilled workforce, Madam Speaker. Our economy needs it. That will help to transform our economy. And because their skills are valuable, they would be paid better as well. So then we raise the level of wages and salaries, and we don't stuck mired as the lowest paid people in the entire OECS and CARICOM. Madam Speaker, in short, I'm calling for a radical and new approach to TVET that sees it offers relevant training and certification to all students, not just to dropouts and at-risk students, including those who are doing well academically. Encourage them to enroll in such programs. It calls, Madam Speaker, a vision of this magnitude and investment on this scale are what is required when we speak about technical and vocational education. Madam Speaker, we have outlined as a component, of our Youth Guarantee Pledge that all young people must have access to quality technical and vocational programs as part of the normal education system. We imagine, Madam Speaker, that students, including those who have completed CAPE and associate degrees, will consider attending a first-class, a first-rate technical and vocational institution that offers higher levels of training and certification than exists currently, to obtain relevant skills and trainings that will enable them to get good jobs here and elsewhere in the region. Of course, I'd prefer them to stay here and build up ST.VINCENT and the Grenadines. Students who attend the technical and vocational centers in various parts of the country now. You see, I've outlined the ones that they have now existing, which offer level 1 courses. And the minister himself said yesterday that they're not meeting the needs of the economy, because when they go to the jobs, the employer says that they're not really ready yet for the work. So obviously, what we're providing there is not, it doesn't meet the young people's needs, and it doesn't meet the needs of the economy. So what are we doing? So we need to move it upwards. So students who are attending those institutions now may also be able to move up to the higher levels at the TVET institution, which will have to be created, obviously, to receive advanced training and certification in their discipline. What the government is talking about now is helpful, but is ultimately limited. A true revolution in education requires not more the same, not building block by block on what exists now. It needs a foundation upon which a new course for our education can be pursued. And this budget clearly lacks that. And I illustrated it from the estimates, Madam Speaker. You know, what is the expression? You can't make, whatever, come back. Don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed for me. Madam Speaker, the point is this. A true revolution in education requires more than that. And so, you know, the budget has failed the people and the young people in this country. And, you know, you can build up all kinds of acronyms, whatever you want. It's not going to change the price of eggs. There are so many of them in the minister's speech already. I don't know. We stand up at night trying to figure out what's another one to put. But why waste time on that when, in fact, we should be dealing with the problems that our economy has with respect to the availability of skilled people and the problem our young people in particular have in getting the skills necessary to find the jobs in this economy. So we had to think big, Madam Speaker, and turn the education system around. That would be truly a revolution in education. Okay. Madam Speaker, I said at the outset, and will repeat, the country, you cannot have a country without the economy growing, a functioning economy. Borrowing and begging and getting grants and so forth, those should be put into the task of building that economy. But we have to deal with the productive sectors. I spoke about agriculture. just now, I want to say a bit about the blue economy, which, is necessary. I spoke a little bit about it earlier, about the fishing industry and the challenges and the possibilities and the opportunities that are there. But we need, Madam Speaker, to take this component of our economy, this sector of our economy, much more seriously, and stop all the talking and grandstanding and promising, and basically not much substantively is being done. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for us to have a thriving economy, Madam Speaker, the blue economy must take off. That is a fact. Tourism is still at its very beginning in this country. The minister is talking about the numbers and so forth that increased. Go and compare them to Antigua and Barbados and so forth, and you see that although they increased, that we're still very much at the bottom of the scale. So we have a long way to go, but we're tending in the right direction. But, Madam Speaker, students, the problem with the economy here now is that for 20 years, the ULP government, they've been talking about investing in upgrading the local fishing fleet to make it more efficient and productive. You see that all the time. It recurs. As my friend, the member for South Leeward likes to say sometimes, it's like a recurring decimal. It just keeps coming back every year in the budget, and nothing seems to be done. The low level of support and the small amounts being spent, and the trumpeting of stuff that they did the year before and so forth and not delivered. I mean, it's sad. It's pathetic, Madam Speaker, because what it says is that they really have not given much thought as to how to advance this objective of essentially making the fishing industry transform from one of being subsistence production to one that is more commercial. They've talked about it, and they've said these things are available and so forth, but you look in practice and see around you after 20 years where it's happening. It is not. So they have to invest more in it, Madam Speaker, and to show in the same way that I talked about Tibet, that there is a real sense that we are moving into a new era rather than this incremental thing. You put a few, the minister said that KCCU has now made a facility, extended a facility for loans to fishers. And how much is the amount? $500,000. I can't even buy one boat for some people if you want to do deep sea fishing. Yeah. Huh? For engines. Yeah? Well, it can't. Is that wrong? Even $500,000, so by how many engines? The point is, Madam Speaker, you know the fact. I know individuals who have been investing in that industry. It costs money. And the point, I'm not saying government will provide everything, but the point is that if we are going to signal that this is an important aspect of our economy, you're not doing it as a favor to a particular fisherman. You're not doing it for people who you may not have particular respect for or whatever. The point is you're doing it because you want to build the economy of the country. And these are the people who are the stakeholders in it. So we have to provide the resources. We have to provide the support. We have to provide all the things that are necessary to make them more productive. And stop looking at fisherfolk as basically the lowest of the low in the economy. They are very productive. They're hardworking. They're intelligent. I know a lot of fellas in my community who would really love the opportunity to be able to expand from the fishing, the open boats that they go out in the morning at 4 or 5 o'clock and come back 10, 11 o'clock with 100 or 200 pounds of fish and then looking for a market to sell it. That is not going to, Madam Speaker, transform the fishing industry. We must do better than that. What the minister has outlined here is essentially the same thing that we've had in the past. We have, for example, he talks about expanding the Solidarity fishing fleet. And there's $3 million he sets out in the budget that was presented here for that. Last year was $4.4 million. I don't know where the other 1.4 gone. But anyway, he says there's $3 million there for the so-called Solidarity fishing fleet. That includes Venezuela and Cuba and so forth. But nothing has been done. And from the vague references to damage done to those countries from hurricane and so forth, there doesn't seem to be any indication that it's going to happen anytime soon, or maybe not at all. So we can't forever, Madam Speaker, and I'll say more about this at another occasion, but we can't forever be talking about takeoff in this industry. We can't forever be talking about facilities made available to fisher folk. We can't forever, Madam Speaker, talk big about when rainforest is coming, or we have to have $10 million worth of supply and so forth. You ask the question, well, who's going to produce it? Where are they going to get it from? And you create this artificial problem now where you say, oh, we don't have a supply here in St. Vincent and Grenadine, so therefore they have to import to do it, when you know full well that there was never the capacity to do the supply. Because we have not built organically the base of the producers and the fisher folk to give them the role. I said earlier, that we have to move away from this perspective that somehow our people are spectators in our own development. That when it does not suit our timetable to include them because it's inconvenient, it takes too long, that they're not prepared, that we go and we find alternatives and deliver it on behalf of whoever is the investor. When you do that, Madam Speaker, you continually sideline our people and they don't themselves be a part of the development process and they don't benefit financially from it. So we have to take the time to build it organically, as they did, for example, in Grenada. You go to Petit Martinique now and you see that there are boats, and Christmas, like Christmas lights in the evening, because they have invested in it and they have grown organically. They have grown from the smaller boats to the bigger boats until over generation now, You have people who they go to school, they get all the subjects and they go on fishing because it is more lucrative. It makes sense rationally as a business person to do that. Why are we thinking about Solidarity Fishing Fleet? Why is that the focus? Where government feels that they are the ones, they could do everything. And you're going to bring in boats and then you're going to take the fisher folk and put them on deck as deckhands and then say, okay, well, if you learn how to do it now and you want to do it on your own, this is what you said last year, then the funds, we can help you to do so. How are they going to do it? The bottleneck is the money. I know a young one who bought a boat last year and was getting into the tuna business. The hurricane bearer come and wash it out to sea. He lost it, everything. $300,000 investment, probably more than that. And so assistance has to be provided, Madam Speaker, for those persons who have taken the risk and who have the entrepreneurship to say, let's do as a matter of, because these things, we are sort of like our people. There is so much risk involved and there is so little room for failure that we want to watch and make sure that somebody tried first to see if it worked. And if this person and it work out, then somebody else says, I could do that too. And so the example of these persons who have taken the lead and so forth must be encouraged and they must be allowed to get back up and complete it and let other people see it's possible to do it. So that's, Madam Speaker, what I believe need to be done. And as I said, with respect to agriculture, we need to have separate ministries. We need a Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Conservation to push the agenda of fishing and fisherfolk, and also to steer this very important component of our economy in the right direction, to make it rapidly growing, to exploit the potential that we have, and make this a lucrative industry that really can transform lives. And it's possible, Madam Speaker, with a bit more seriousness in the contemplation of government, but also making the resources available and letting the people, the stakeholders in the industry know, Madam Speaker, that there is a new approach being done and that we are relying on you. This is a partnership, Don't feel that when they come to you and they're asking for assistance that they're bugging you, they're bothering you. This is a resource. You should be saying, let me see how we could get this person what they need in order they can become productive and demonstrate that this industry can truly take off. But we haven't reached that point yet. After 20-something years of promising and saying that they have this money in the budget to do it, to help people, but it has not been delivered. It's time for us to do it. Madam Speaker, I want to say just briefly, because I've said it repeatedly in past budgets, but I want to make it as a matter of my approach in this debate, to put it as part of the record, that as part of the blue economy as well, we have to get our Otley Hall Marina and Shipyard up and working. The minister has said repeatedly when I ask questions, oh, we have private sector people who are interested and so forth, and we have plans to do it. This time in the budget this year, there was no mention of it. So I have to say, well, like maybe it is embarrassing talking about it. I suddenly decided, well, this isn't worth the while, because the damage that has been done to that facility, Madam Speaker, is incalculable. It is a real shame. It's a disgrace to see the condition in which it is. And this is a facility, Madam Speaker, that can make money hand over fist. It can make money, but more importantly, it can supply the needs of our local fishing fleet. It can supply the needs for our local shippers who go to the various regions, countries in the region. It could also be a resource for the ferry operators, Madam Speaker. Now, if they want to clean the bottom of the boat, they have to go to Grenada or to Trinidad. You have a little repair to do, you have to go down to Trinidad. You know, you get down there, they say, come Wednesday, you go Wednesday. They say, oh, the boat that was on now on dock, they're not finished yet. They're going to be here until next week, Tuesday, and you have to waste time, pay crew and all that stuff down. It's a waste and a hardship on those people, when in fact we have the facility here that is capable of doing that. And why the government has failed over these 23, 24 years to take an interest in developing it. You know, what they did when they came to office initially is they had a commission of inquiry. They tried to show James Mitchell in jail, you know, to make them NDP accountable for what they considered to be. I don't know what they thought it was. But it went all the way to this Privy Council and it was thrown out. And then the commission of inquiry just fizzled. $7 million later. We still have a facility, Madam Speaker, that is not developed. It has gotten from worse, bad to worse. The dry dock now has separated from the wall so that it can't hold in the water. I mean, it's terrible. The pontoon lift is completely rusted out. There's what it's being used for, Otley Hall, as I said earlier on, it was a transformative project, and it still can be, as it was conceived by the New Democratic, by James Mitchell and the NDP. It still can be. It can provide really good jobs for people in that part of the country, skilled jobs for young people in electrical engineering, welding, carpentry, diving, motor mechanic, all kinds of work, sanding, detailing, all kinds of skills, Madam Speaker, highly skilled work. You know, I know people from my community who are in the United States, in Florida. That's the business that they do. In Fort Lauderdale, and also in Rhode Island and places like that, and they make a decent living doing it. They have skill they can transfer here, Madam Speaker. But this government, they just simply will not allow that facility to see the light of day. And the only reason is that for it to succeed, it would be a vindication of the vision of Sir James and the New Democratic Party. And that is why it has not been allowed to prosper. And that is, Madam Speaker, a real stain on this government. Madam Speaker, I wish now to say more briefly some comments about tourism. Tourism. Madam Speaker, it's true to say there has been a post-pandemic boom in tourism, not just here but all over the Caribbean. Of course, we had the interruption with the Hurricane Beryl. Cruise tourism clearly is experiencing high growth in numbers, but there must be a plan, Madam Speaker, to take a plan to get a certain, let's have a target, how many, to get a certain number of the cruise visitors who come here to return, as stay-over visitors, because that's one of the real advantages of having the cruise tourism, is that people come, they have a good experience, they spend one day and they say, nah, boy, I got to go back and say a little bit more. And they come back the next day or maybe 5, 10 years later, whatever. But more so they can speak to others and give a good word on our behalf and become ambassadors for our country as well, to say good things on behalf of our tourism sector. But, Madam Speaker, we have seen that the cruise numbers have gone up. They said that last year. So we have to continue to take advantage of that. I say here what we have to do, And yachting has also increased. Of course, it suffered because of Beryl, but I believe that there will be a rebound. I was, so pleased, Madam Speaker, to see over the Christmas season. And I took my sister-in-law who was visiting to a high point so she could see Port Elizabeth Harbor from at night. It was packed with yachts, and then you look from a distance and you look down, it was a beautiful sight. I had seen that many years ago, 2004, 2005, when the yachting industry was booming here, and then it had tailed off. But it was good to see that so many were back in the harbor, Madam Speaker. It is something that we have to capitalize on. We have the best yachting destination in the entire Caribbean, probably one of the best in the world. Yachting is also, the ECCB, Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, has said, it's one of the areas in the tourism sector that earns a lot per capita from coming in to our waters. Because when yachties come ashore, they don't want to stay on the boat. They want to go to a restaurant and get something to eat, so long as their boats are safe. And we have to continue to provide, because we still rank, unfortunately, at the very top of the list for burglarizing of yachts and so forth, and crimes against yachties. We need to get that problem solved. It requires, what it requires. It requires proper patrols in the harbor. When it was introduced, anyway, in Beckware some years ago, it helped with the problem, but it hasn't gone away. And so the point I'm making is that this industry, the yachting sector, is something that we need to focus on more to get it back up, because all the chandlery shops that I knew of when I first returned there back in 2000, they had, several of them, some large, fairly large. They've closed down, sail making and so forth. A lot of the businesses have shrunk. Some of them, they've gone to Grenada, and we have lost that business, and we are the primary destination. We need to turn that around, Madam Speaker. We have to be creative now in finding ways to have the yachties come here as their base, and so that they go and they sail and they come back here again as their base. There was one operator in Port Elizabeth, Trade Winds, that had that model where they would come and they would start there. They have a lot to be done, Madam Speaker. We can do it, but we have to think about it. We can't just simply say, we numbers are up and we're happy and so forth. The potential is great. In 2005, Madam Speaker, I think it was 2005, 2006, thereabout, we had, I think, 95,000 yacht visitors in St. Vincent and Grenadines, or thereabouts. That number has declined to about half that over the years. We used to be so far ahead of all the other islands. Now, Grenada and St. Lucia are ahead of us. We have lost a lot of that business. And it really, you can see it in the way in which the services that used to be rendered. The yacht, the people who go out and service the yacht, whether it's ice or laundry and so forth. Been doing that for 25 years. I've been doing decent business. But now, Madam Speaker, it's all shrunk. And so we have to get that back. We can't sit on our laurels and say, well, the yacht is a return. All year's night in Beckway, they had lots of yachts in the harbor, and I'm sure they had in Union Island and Mairo and in Tobago Keys and in Villa and so forth. But, we can do a lot more. Madam Speaker, with respect to cruise tourism, there's so much more that we need to do in order to capitalize. I said we must have a plan to get people to come back. To do that, they have to have a good experience. But we also have a plan to get them to max out the credit card when they're here. You don't want a situation where, Madam Speaker, we are actually at the lowest end of the spending scale in terms of the average per capita, the per capita spending of the crew members and the visitors on cruise ships visiting the countries in the Circum-Caribbean area. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is one of the lowest in terms of per capita spending. We need to get that up. That's how we make money. We don't just want people to come and say St. Vincent nice and pretty. You want them to come and buy something. You want them to do something. You see how the people, the vendors who basically, they spend their time making all these wonderful crafts and so forth. And the way in which they display them is almost as though they are a nuisance, because they are not being given the proper way in which to present themselves, and they have to make do with palettes and so on, and looks very untidy. We have to have a plan, Madam Speaker, to make this all part of the economy. When we talk about the fourth pillar of our economy, we talk about the new economy, getting the craft vendors and the craft makers and so forth as an essential part of the economy, not just as a cultural expression of our creativity, but as something that actually can generate a decent living for those persons. But they need the assistance as well. And so we have to have that, Madam Speaker, as part of the plan to develop our tourism. We also have to get the sites going, you know. We have to improve the sites. Good Lord, the minister is now telling me that Fort Charlotte, they still ain't finished it yet. I think it takes longer to repair Fort Charlotte than it took to build it originally. You know, the way in which these guys are going. It's ridiculous. You have the tourism season, you can't go up, the fellas, the taxi drivers, they can't take somebody up there and get a fare. You want to go to Montreal Garden, you can't go because the road is so terrible, most taxis won't take you. You want to go to... What? Well, I'm telling you. So they wrote him on... Listen, the road to the greenhouse is not the road to Montreal Garden. You know that. The road to the greenhouse goes around to the back. The problem that we have, Madam Speaker, is not me saying so. You go and talk to the people who operate the facility. You talk to the taxi drivers. You see, what I said, what I said, Madam Speaker, is this. What I said earlier on, that these fellas, they're in a bubble. You know? And they don't understand what is actually going on, and they don't see. Go talk to the taxi drivers. All right. You could go Montreal. You could go Montreal. All right, fine. The point of the matter is, Madam Speaker, that is a fantastic facility, you will admit. Yes. The point is, Madam Speaker, we have these facilities that are not being properly maintained and developed. You have Fort Charlotte, you have Pirates of the Caribbean at Walibu, which basically has not been developed. Fort Hamilton in Bequia, you know, which has been allowed to run down. That was fixed, since 30 years ago, and nothing has been done. All of these things, Madam Speaker, we can do and do better in order to improve our tourism product. I agree, Madam Speaker, that numbers are up for still visitors. That's good. That's where you also have spending because they are renting rooms and so forth and having restaurant services and all the various other things that we want them to spend on. As I say, max out the credit card when they come. But there are bottlenecks, you know, with the shortage of hotel accommodations and so forth. These are things that has to be accelerated. We can't simply, wait for it to come. We have to accelerate it to make sure that we can leapfrog, because we are way behind in tourism, you know. Way behind Antigua and St. Lucia. We have moved forward, but if we move one step forward, they're going, 1.5. They have longer, yes. All excuses, they are longer. So the point that I'm making is this, is that we can't take the incremental approach. We have to find ways in which to leapfrog these things because we have high unemployment, we have social problems that are emerging because people are feeling that they have no place in this economy, that things are hard and the desperation is setting in. We have to, Madam Speaker, take a much more proactive approach to getting this done. And we are not seeing it here. And Madam Speaker, if the numbers are up, as I said, that's all good, but we have to make hay while the sun shines. And so we have to find ways in which to capitalize on that so that the returnees would be there, so that not just the large hotels will benefit from it, but the small operators here, the local operators, that they can also take advantage in this post-pandemic boom. And I hope that it continues. Madam Speaker, just again to finish off on this, I was up in north of the country, both sides, not so long ago, and we have some seriously spectacular scenery in this country. Really, I mean, it is breathtaking. And here in the interior, and mainland and north, and leeward side, and Fancy and so forth, looking up the mountains, it takes your breath away. And similarly, in the Grenadines, you can't stay in Mairo and look across to the Tobago Keys and not have your breath taken away by the awesome beauty of it all. So we have what it takes. God has been good to us. We have been blessed. And it's for us now to make the most of it. And so, Madam Speaker, what I'm suggesting here is that there's a hell of a lot more that we can do to get this done. In the mainland, for example, I was talking to my colleague from South Leeward about this the other day. The real aggressive approach to promoting, you should call it ecotourism, but I think about more as wellness tourism, where you essentially, disconnect from certain things and you go into the hills and so forth, and you have rustic but luxurious accommodation, Glamping, all right, well, not exactly glamping, but I think something more like, you have all the treatments and so forth that people like to do, massages, and of course, it's an important part of to get our cannabis industry going, to integrate that with part of our recreation marijuana industry. That is where we have to go, Madam Speaker. Huh? No, recreational. Medicinal ain't going anywhere. Recreational is where it needs to go. Yeah. Madam Speaker, crime and security. The minister. This, I think, is for me the biggest, most disappointing part of the budget presentation. All of what we have been through, Madam Speaker, given the state of crime in the country, acknowledged by the minister, one expected to have some bold new initiatives to counter the present situation. At paragraph 72, page 72 of his presentation. Let me see if I find it. Yeah. He says in the second paragraph on the citizen security, there is absolutely no debate that every right-thinking Vincentian is dissatisfied with the levels of criminal activity in the country, particularly numbers of homicide. So then you said, all right, so what are you going to do about it? And here he talks about there are other countries that are almost as bad as ours and some that are doing better and so forth. And then he says, well, we will continue to analyze the respective trends at home and regionally to distill the best practices, and that will be the most beneficial to our crime prevention strategies. And that's it. And you look for the strategies. Madam Speaker, there is, they talk about investment in the police, but those positions, they've done them for increasing the promotion possibilities at the higher ranks. We have, which hopefully, if it results in better morale in the service, then it should help with policing. But also, he talks about adding more CCTV cameras, expansion of police stations and so forth. But the problem that we have here, Madam Speaker, is that, retrofitting the courthouse in Kingstown, having heard from CELAC people that there's international cooperation in fighting crime and so forth, all of that stuff has been out there already. The point is, Madam Speaker, we have to acknowledge that we're in a crisis situation when it comes to crime in this country. You can't keep burying your head in the sand and saying, oh, it's just a few people doing this and so forth. It's affecting the entire society. We had 2 record-breaking years, or 3 in a row, or tying this year, for homicides. And that's only the worst case. But you have this situation with sexual violence against women and girls. We have the situation with, Pretty Larceny that I mentioned before. Those are crimes. We have the situation with yacht break-ins and so forth. We still rank at the very top in the region. These are things, Madam Speaker, that call for real acknowledgement that we have a crisis situation in the country in particular. You're an island. Well, I ain't taking your thunder, okay? so, so, so I setting it up for you. But the point is here, Madam Speaker, we have in this budget nothing that really points to, there's nothing that points to any departure from what we have now. You know, the minister is basically, he concluded most extraordinarily on this situation of crime. This is the last line in what he has to say. Together, and only together, we can reverse this temporary tide. This temporary tide. If you are perceiving the problem as some transient problem, Madam Speaker, of a few persons, then it's no wonder that it doesn't really exercise the imagination of the government to say, well, we have to be more creative in coming up with ways in which to deal with this problem. But the people all over the country, we don't see it, they don't see it as a temporary tide, Madam Speaker. You know, they see it as a blight on their community, where young men in particular are being killed and killing one another, where generations of people are losing hope in this country, where you have so much, Madam Speaker, to live for, but so many people are dying for other things. We have to sell that message to people, but first of all, we have to stem this tide. That is not temporary. It becomes permanent if we do nothing about it. And what we have seen, Madam Speaker, some years ago, there was a scholar from the university in UAE who came and said that, you know, we are at a tipping point. If we're not careful, we're going to be a country where you have chronically high homicide rates. And then you have situations where there are, you know, the situation will be out of control in a sense that the law enforcement as it exists will not be able to cope with it. And, you know, Madam Speaker, people tell you they're fearful. The country seems to be out of control. It's falling apart when it comes to criminal justice. We're not getting the results that we require. And so many of the incidents of gun violence and so forth and homicides, they're not being successfully investigated and prosecuted. So you have 7 out of 10 of the homicides. Nobody's held accountable. I mean, how can you have a criminal justice system that functions on that basis? There's no credibility whatsoever. So we have to demonstrate, Madam Speaker, that there is a recognition of this situation and that we are going to do something radically different going forward. There is nothing, you read this, there's absolutely nothing in this presentation of the minister that indicates there is that recognition. And that is what people are calling for more than ever in this country. And so, Madam Speaker, my colleague, I'm sure, will say more on it. The healthcare system in the country, Madam Speaker. This is a subject matter. I know healthcare is one of the biggest problems in the country. The minister talked about increases in spending. You know, there have been more doctors, more nurses, and other healthcare workers. I don't doubt him. I saw the numbers that he spoke about. But the fact is that the conditions and the service provided, especially at Milton Cote Memorial Hospital, are poor. People don't want to engage with the healthcare system. Something is wrong if the minister feels he's investing so much in it and the outcomes continue to be poor. Something is wrong with the management of the system. We have all heard the horror stories, so I don't have to repeat them here. You know, I can't read and spell for everyone. Everyone. It's unnecessary in this circumstance because we have all heard the stories. And of course, we all hope for better when the new hospital the minister spoke about yesterday is being built at Arnoldsville. A hospital which is necessary, is overdue, because of the poor condition at Milton Cato Memorial Hospital, our premier hospital in this country. The hospital project at Arnorsville is one that we, in the side of the House, we supported the loan to build that hospital, even though it's a rather expensive loan. But we support $125 million that is being borrowed from the Export-Import Bank in Taiwan, I think that's what it was. But it's being borrowed from Taiwanese to build a hospital. We supported it, so let me get that out of the way. We are not the backward people that you say are opposing projects just to make cheap political points. We supported this project. We, in fact, were promoting the building of a new hospital since in 2010 on the campaign trail. And remember, they ridicule the idea, oh, you're building Farmville, and so forth. Well, you're looking at the building and say, oh, you're building Farmville. Well, the building you have on the cover of this is not particularly impressive either. Yeah, it's real? No. This is the building that you have. It's not real. It's a building. It's a picture. So we will see. But the point is this, Madam Speaker. Beyond aesthetics, the point is that we have serious problems in the healthcare system that we need to address. We have a situation still, Madam Speaker, where there is shortage of necessary medicines, where you have people who can't get bandages for their wounds, they have to carry stuff. People tell you that when you go to the hospital, they give you a shopping list and tell you to buy this stuff and come back and we'll treat you. That cannot continue, Madam Speaker, because healthcare is a human right. It's a fundamental human right. And we have to provide that for our people. The challenge, Madam Speaker, that we have is that in the building of the facility at Arnorsville, that is only one component of providing service to people. What we have to ask the question is this: how are we going to ensure that there is access? And there's a point, actually, I want to remember this, because I remember when we were debating the loan bill, Minister of Finance, you remember this. I asked about the facility's ability to cater for mental health services. And you said you weren't sure what scope there was, whether it was, a desk or clinic or ward, what a service there is. But we need some clarity in that, because we know that this is an area where we have shamefully fallen short in the way in which we treat mental health illnesses in this country. So this hospital, maybe when you wind up, you could say whether there is no provision being made to provide services for mental health services in that facility. So, Madam Speaker, what we need to do, it's not just a matter of building the new building, it's important. You have to have a purpose-built facility that is properly organized, that is more efficient, and have the proper tools and machinery and so forth to deliver care for people. But the accessibility must be guaranteed. And so how is that going to be done? The government has not said anything about that in the present budget presentation. There was talk at some point about a fee-for-service model that was floated some time ago as an option. But I guess, as I said, nothing was mentioned yesterday. The minister did quote in his presentation he quoted Kathleen Sebelius, who was Health and Human Services Secretary at one time in the U.S., in her quoting of Dr. Martin Luther King, about the consequence of injustice in health. And, I don't think Dr. King meant the government building a new hospital as such was the issue. Because, we all know there are very fine hospitals in the United States and lots of services. I think what he was getting at there was access, the quality of access to the services provided. And so we need to talk about the quality of access. We need to talk about access for everybody to truly advance healthcare in our country. The time has come to consider the National Health Insurance Plan. This is something that we, the New Democratic Party, had put forward as a program towards the end of the term in office, and the time has come for us to do it. You know, we can't ignore it anymore. There's a study that was done by the Professor Carl Theodore, the Health Economics Unit at UE, that is comprehensive. And I do have a copy of it here, Madam Speaker, where it outlines the management structure, the quality of the service, how it's going to be paid for, not even that, how it's going to be, how the fees are going to be collected, and what are the types of services that would be rendered. But it also sets out, Madam Speaker, some of the principles upon which it intends, it thinks that the system would be guided. And I will just read them, Madam Speaker. Nobody can seriously disagree with them. Yeah, it says the mission of the National Health Insurance Program is the guiding principles. Universality. All citizens of St. Vincent and the Grenadines should be eligible as beneficiaries to access the services covered by the National Health Insurance Plan. Equity. All eligible beneficiaries shall have full access to the designated package of services to be covered by the program and share the cost of services depending on their ability to pay. Efficiency. The National Health Insurance Plan should be geared towards providing the best health service that is feasible at the lowest possible cost to the society as a whole, not the individual, the society as a whole, because when it's spread across the society, that's when it becomes affordable. Quality. The program should foster high standards of care through the delivery of necessary services in appropriate and well-maintained facilities by qualified personnel in a caring and professional manner. And then the integration of health services and, of course, accountability. That it should define the rights and obligations of the key stakeholders so that lines and levels of responsibilities are clearly understood and adhered to. This would ensure the smooth and effective functioning of the system. Madam Speaker, I have been through this document, and it's remarkable the level of detail and all the things that are covered. There's a governance structure, as I said. There is a plan for how you register, registration of persons. What is the contribution base? And the NDP, they said everybody, basically, the employees would contribute a certain amount. And for persons who are unemployed, that the government had at the time given a commitment that they would make a contribution on behalf of persons who are unemployed. And so this is to ensure universal coverage on behalf of, for all the people of the country. And the services that were being provided, Madam Speaker, they'd outlined a very detailed list of services. Primary care, I'll give you some example, benefit package, because people need to know what is it you're getting for this. Because when you say, oh, you have an health insurance plan, you're going to charge people a certain amount of money. The point is, let me just say, I've heard persons say, for a national health insurance plan, we can't afford it. I mean, that is the most ludicrous statement anybody can make. Because people get sick, whether you can afford it or not. So when you say that, what you're saying is that if you can't afford it, you die. Because you will get sick, whether you have a national health insurance plan or not. So the point is, how do we as a progressive society, as a humane society, decide, not a humane society, that sounds like animals, as a society where we are caring for one another, where we provide this basic need, this basic human right, so that ensure that people have basic health care. It's the same with education. We all pay into the education system. You think somebody will say, okay, my child can't go here, or this child can't go there because they're not paying to go to the school. It benefits the society as a whole. So that is, Madam Speaker, if we start with that proposition, then there's only one alternative, is to get the thing done and to find a more effective way to do it, to help our people. So what we have, Madam Speaker, they had 2 tiers of services benefit package. The primary care package, for example, had health promotion, private doctor visits, healthcare services, district hospital services, home nurse service in the public sector, defined list of pharmaceuticals which you can have, lab tests, x-rays, ultrasounds, school health services, dental care, vision care, mental health care, and institutional public geriatric services. Madam Speaker, those are the primary care services that the plan is intended to cover. Then the secondary care services, public hospitalization, all services, emergency care for public hospitals, complex diagnostic services upon referral. You can't just walk in and say, I want to have this done, I want to have that done. As in other countries, you have to have a primary physician who would then refer you and says, well, you meet the threshold to say you need to get this care and send you on so that we don't have an abuse of the services provided. Special ambulatory care, public and private upon referral, ambulatory day surgery, and limited patient emergency transport coverage. Madam Speaker, these are some of the services that are outlined in this plan. It is necessary. It is time. It's time now. We have all supported this new venture in creating the hospital at Arnoldsville. Some may prefer it somewhere else and so forth, but you in government, you decide to put it in Arnoldsville, fine. They have the technology to be able to deal with any flooding that will take place in that area. But what is important is to ensure that it lives up to the billing, that it's not just a pretty building, and then you have the same attitudes and the same service and the same lack of bandages and medicine and so forth in the facility. It is better to have everybody, essentially, who can contribute to the maintaining of the system. That will guarantee better services for all of us. I mean, our healthcare system, let's face it, Madam Speaker, it is really out of date. There are some clinics that are better than others. There's some you go, they've been there for like 30 years and they hardly have anything there. This is healthcare in the 21st century. We have to rise to our game because this is something that is necessary for our enjoyment of the good society, of good life in our country. But more than that, a healthy nation is a wealthy nation. So it's an investment as well in our economic development. And finally, Madam Speaker, on the healthcare system, on health. The minister mentioned that the Paget Farm Clinic will be built this year. Well, hallelujah. Because that clinic, Madam Speaker, let me get a little story. The Paget Farm Clinic was there for years and years and years. The government, so James basically built a community center for the people in Paget Farm. And I could say without fear of contradiction, that community center was probably used more than any community center anywhere in the country. Everything, after school classes, exercises, church services, funerals, meetings, all kinds of functions were being held there. It was fully utilized by the community. And then, of course, the government decided just unilaterally, no consultation, that they're going to take over the community center. This is after a private entity, individual, had actually paid to fix it up for the community. They fixed it up, they renovated it for the community to use. And then, shortly thereafter, a couple of years after, the minister decided that he wanted to use it for the healthcare clinic. And he did so, Madam Speaker. And we have, Madam Speaker, a situation now where you have the clinic is occupying the community center, and then they bring the magistrate's court also in the community center. And that is before us downstairs, they already put the police in the community center. So the people in the community don't have the use of the community center. So that's why I say hallelujah, because this will mean then that the building will be returned to the community. Once the healthcare clinic is out, the magistrate's court have to find some place to go. The police should also find some place to go. Fix the police station. There's a police station in Paget Farm there that they said it's, for whatever reason, it's derelict. Fix it. Good Lord, that's been how many years? 15 years the police been down there now. It's ridiculous. And this is a facility that the community desperately needs. There's no place now to have a meeting. You want to have a meeting down in Paget Farm, you go by the ramp with the fishermen there. It's unconscionable. And the people have been patient and they've said, okay, fine, we want a healthcare clinic because it serves us. And they make the trade and so forth, but, get it back so you can have both again as they used to do. That needs to be done. But the clinic, Madam Speaker, I'm told that it's going to be located someplace. This is what I hear, the rumor, down past the primary school and so on. If that's the location, I want the minister to reconsider that, because it's not a suitable location. And I've heard a lot of complaints from persons about it. You should do some consultation in the community about accessibility and so forth. It doesn't take much, it doesn't take no skin off your nose, as they say, to go down and talk to people. Say, listen, guys, sorry, we take away your clinic, we're going to build it back now, we're coming here. Here is what we think about putting it in. Let me hear what the people say. What's so hard about that? You know? Tell me you're coming and I will go with you. Eh? Absolutely. All right. Now, Madam Speaker, as it's a nice segue into community matters here. You know? Constituency matters. Madam Speaker, they say all politics is local, and that's good advice. So, you know, I want to reach out to my constituents in Northern Grenadines. Of course, as a leader of the opposition, my constituents are all over the country. But ultimately, I get elected. What I do is, in my constituency, Madam Speaker, is I look out for the interests of the people in Northern Grenadines. And so, let me begin with a bit of good news. The minister said yesterday that the repairs to Beckwood Community High School is ongoing and going to be done. Last time I went and visited, they told me they will hand it over by the 8th of December. I told them, I said, that's a bit optimistic. Yeah, I said maybe the end of December. But I hear that they're still working. But, Madam Speaker, I want to give credit where credit is due. The facility looks great. You know, the work that has been done by the contractor it looks really good. It has taken longer than anticipated, but I think the people will be happy when it's done. The invitation was extended to me by the contractor to visit the project, and you know, I appreciate that, because I think it's I guess in a sense he was proud of what he was doing, so he wanted to kind of show off that stuff was being done. And I was pleased to see that it had advanced. You know, I'm the area representative, and that's the way area representatives, you know, should be included in this way, in these kinds of projects in the community. How else are they going to be able to explain to the constituents what is happening and to raise concerns if they think that they're legitimate ones that can help to make the thing better? But, you know, Madam Speaker, I am not just a representative seeking information about that school. That's my alma mater. I was actually the very first class that entered that school a very long time ago, you know? And we had, Madam Speaker, a wonderful time in Form 1. We were learning about ancient Roman history and the pillage of Carthage, and because we had two teachers, Madam Speaker, from Canada who had come down to run the school. And it was fascinating stuff. I enjoyed it. I still have the textbook we used to use, you know? I learned about Cro-Magnon men and Neanderthals and all kinds of things, and the emergence of the Ziggurat-at-Ur and the what do you call it, civilizations in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, and all of these things about the origin of human civilization. Fascinating stuff, Madam Speaker. But what it meant is that we had to repeat Form 1. So when you went up to the other school, Madam Speaker, consequently, secondary school took me 6 years. Not because I was a dunce, but because we were in the wrong curriculums. Anyway, we enjoyed the time that was there. It's my alma mater, Madam Speaker. I want to see. Fitz was there as well. You know, that was his school. Yeah? Well, we overlapped to some extent. Because he likes to tell you that I was his captain on the football team and the cricket team and all that stuff. But the point is, Madam Speaker, it's a project that I take considerable interest in, and I want to see it done. And I want to urge the teachers and the students and the parents to take good care of the facility, because it is theirs to use. When I entered the school in the first class that entered that school so many years ago, it was a brand new building. We had, you know, programs that never was taught before. That school, we taught food nutrition, you know. You had a technical center that basically had the best tools and chisels and so forth, all kinds of things. And I went and dabbled in making woodworking stuff. We taught navigation. They taught French. You know, they taught all kinds of things that weren't done there before, Madam Speaker. And so it was actually, I passed to go to grammar school, but I chose to go to school there. You know, you ask now, and they will tell you, you choose to go to grammar school, and you go to grammar school. They don't go to school there. You know? And so we need to turn that around. You know, we need to turn that around. But it's something, Madam Speaker, that will take the entire community effort. So I'd want to see that the organization of the school itself, the principals, the teachers, and the parent-teacher association be formed to basically manage that facility properly and to give the parents and the teachers new hope for education in that community. You see the ferry in a morning, how many students come up here? Over 100 students every day making the ferry trip up here to go to all the schools around the country, because parents want, my kids went to grammar school as well, because you want the best for your children. But we need to transform education so that in the secondary schools, as there is with the primary schools, that you can have a quality education in Port Elizabeth, you can have it in Sandy Bay, you can have it in Peterborough, in Chateau, you can have it anywhere across the country. And that has to be the goal, Madam Speaker. Because as you know, keen as the students are to come and travel on the ferry every morning to come up here, they prefer, well, they should anyway, to be able to be closer to their communities, where they can do things as part of the school as an extension into the community. You can stay after class and play your sports and so forth. You can go and do classes as we used to do when you're preparing for Christmas pageant programs and so forth. You don't have to rush and catch the ferry. I mean, and also just the cost of transporting children up and down. It's prohibitive, you know. And some people, you're talking about the ferry cost, and once you get here, you have to get, for those who are going to Maricoa Convent and so forth, you have to go from here to there, or those who are going to the community college, where you can't avoid that because we only have the one college. But the cost is quite prohibitive. So we need to up the standard as well in the school. We have a new building. We should have proper a new attitude towards its use, and also a new attitude as to what quality of programs that we're going to present. You know, you have to improve the teaching of math and science in those schools so that the students who want to do science, they can do it there. They don't have to come to go to Thomas Saunders or to Girls High School and grammar school. Those are things, Madam Speaker, that are possibilities. But, you know, the government will have to take basically the advice and the input from those in the community, and for us to be able to do this for the people of that community. Madam Speaker, in the roads in my constituency, I have to say this, I mean, guys, sorry, they're the worst in the country. Yeah, all right. Madam Speaker, particularly the road going down to Paget Farm. You've heard me talk about Brough Road. They said they're fixing it and so forth. Nobody is really entirely happy with what's being done there because they fixed it, they paved it, it's still too narrow. It's just a mess. It was supposed to be done since last year, February. We are now almost into February this year, and it still isn't completed. And you're talking about less than 100 feet of road and a retaining wall. Substantial, yes. But it just shows that the minister bragged about the implementation. If that is an example of implementation, then they really have failed because it's still ongoing work. And then you have the road actually going from there all the way down past the, right down to past the fisheries complex, I mean, quite frankly, well, all the way down to Toko, yeah. You know, that road is terrible. It's terrible. There's one section of that road, Madam Speaker, I fear that one day, you know, I hope it doesn't happen, a heavy truck when it rains, because it's starting to lean this way, they had a landslide there about 10 years ago, that the whole thing will just go downhill. There's no retaining wall. There's another road in an area we call it from Sammy Bridge. Many people know what I'm talking about who are listening. We call it Broad Road, which I went there the other day to look, Madam Speaker. From there, going across to the road that goes towards the Vinlex station, that entire road has become an obstacle course. It's not a road anymore, you know, and it needs to be repaired. The retaining wall on the side is broken in two places. I was showing somebody it, and I was afraid to step on it because I thought it could give way at any time. The road itself is broken. It's dangerous. You know, this is something, I don't know what Bragsa is doing, what the Ministry of Transport and Works is doing. It's simply not maintaining the roads. And this is why the list will grow longer and longer. And the minister will have to add more to it when he is doing it. The cleaning of the roads, Madam Speaker, come on. Last Christmas, the roads were not clean in my constituency. Large sections of the road, you know, they used to cut the bush and so on along the side, they just weren't done. Yeah? Well, they didn't have a road gang, they didn't have enough road gang, whatever. It wasn't done. Large sections, people coming to me and asking me, Friday, what happened? They used to cut the road here, this in Friendship area, or even on my road coming down from Mount Pleasant and so forth. Just simply not done. In public area, in the main road, not done. So you're telling me you can't even cut the bush? You know, you can't even cut the bush by the side of the road, good Lord. Come on, man, you got to do better than that. Country really falling apart. Madam Speaker, the hard courts in my constituency, there's one down in Paget Farm, which was built by the NDP after they finished the airport. Wonderful facility. You should see it now. You should see it now. The light stanchions, all the lights have fallen down, well, most of them. The electrical, the whole thing is falling apart, rusted. Cannot be used safely by the community. Why would we disrespect the community like that and take a facility that should have been providing service to our young people? If you love young people so much, why not maintain it? You're not asking you to build it, just maintain the thing so that the people can use it. It's dangerous to be used. One youngster a few years ago actually was shocked, electrical shock, because the hut where the panels were, there was exposed wires and so forth. Since then, they've cut them off. But I mean, it's dangerous. There's a hanging piece of light fixture, which I pointed out about maybe 3 or 4 months ago in a video that I put out, thinking that something would be done. At least send somebody up there to cut the damn thing down, because if it falls, it's going to hurt somebody. And they're big. They're almost the size of this. You know? And kids are there all the time playing. There are wires buried in the grass. You know? As a child running, you catch your foot on that, you go on pelting over the place. There's no care, no concern. The facility up at Clyde playing field, Madam Speaker, the roof. There was a freak storm 2 years ago, July 31st. When there was a wind that came from nowhere, just bam, destroyed part of the roof. It lasted maybe about 20 minutes an hour. It's like a tornado. I don't know if anybody remember that. I don't know if it hit over here, but it certainly hit in Beckway. It did some damage. Winds reach about 60 or 70 miles an hour. But it damaged a part of the roof. And we say, okay, it's a small area, asking the parliament when they fix it. Yeah, we go fix it. They ain't fix it. What happened now? Barrel come, and they tear off more of the roof. And then down in the other section. The other day, last weekend, they had a function up in the park. I don't know how they managed. They had lights up there, and people were playing on the field. They said, oh, they had a great time, but big hole in the roof. If it rained, then the whole thing mash up. You know, it don't take much to do. And it's dangerous as well, you know. So that needs to be repaired, Madam Speaker. And it looks terrible, and it really is causing great harm to the people. How much? 10. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes. So, you think it was more, right? Okay, all right. So, Madam Speaker, I think the tourism sites, I mentioned that in passing, but I'm talking here now specifically about Beckway, the tourism sites, to help the operators. Sometimes I see the operators, they're going with, you know, usually they travel in caravans of 3 or 4 taxis at a time, and they come up my hill and so forth. That's one of the lookout points. You just don't get stuck behind them, you know, when they're going, because only one vehicle could pass at a time. So you just have to wait until the caravan goes and get by. But the point is, Madam Speaker, they're going up there and they're looking for sites, something to show to the tourists, you know. And what's up there, it's beautiful. It's a natural lookout and so forth, and people enjoy it. But then we go down to the other end of the island where you have Fort Hamilton, which is it's a historic fort, you know. It has some interesting history to it. But the facility is just left there like totally, it's like, you know, nobody cares. There's a hut that was put there some years ago to provide some facility for vending. The roof is, the tiles are going. The whole thing, Madam Speaker, shows like it's not really an important tourism site. And the people come and they take the taxi drivers. They have to take people somewhere. They used to go to the Turtle Sanctuary mashup, that done. So they need places to take the visitors so that they can enjoy the island, and also the taxi drivers can make $1. And when I say that when tourists come, because there are quite a few cruise ships that come in the harbor in Port Elizabeth, that they want to be able to have a good experience so that they will come back as a stay-over visitor. And that ought to be a plan built into our tourism sector, as I said. But that is something, Madam Speaker, it needs to be done. We need to have a better plan to develop and maintain the tourism sites. And certainly the one at Fort Hamilton would be at the top of the list in my constituency. Madam Speaker, we need also to look at the transportation situation in the country. I said it in passing, that in my community, the jetty, the ferry wharf, really has, it's a good thing that it was built. I mean, what it replaced was, this was a phenomenal leap forward, what was built at the time by Sir James and the NDP to provide the birthing facilities to this area. I mean, what was there, what I left there, what I went, this was a leap forward. So it has served for the last 25 years, or more than that. But it is being exceeded, the use. And that is a good thing, because it tells you that the traffic has developed and the people have invested and so forth in the boats. And so we need to now think of the next phase of the development. And the entire waterfront is such a treasure under the almond tree and so forth. It needs to be reimagined, the same way we talk about Kingstown. To how do we make this place, show off its beauty, not just its natural beauty, but we can enhance that by the things that we do ourselves. But you have to put some intellect into it, You have to think visionary as to how this thing can look and what is it going to contribute. It contributes first and foremost to our people enjoying the environment, that they enjoy a better standard of living, that they live happier lives, basically. It seems like a small thing, but it's true. This is what happens. And then also for the visitors when they come, that it's something that they also will enjoy as part of what we offer. But all of those things, Madam Speaker, we did a plan some time ago. There was some, I know I have 5 minutes, Madam Speaker, but I'll wrap up. There were some architects and town planners and so forth came to Bequia. It's been a few years now, at the invitation of a very well-known good friend of mine who was an architect, used to teach in the United States and so forth, retired and came down here, and he got them to come. It was quite a big thing for them to come to do it. It was an organization, they called themselves RUDAT. And basically what they did is they did a plan as to how the entire Elizabeth area could be redeveloped. They ain't saying that you have to do this. They're saying that, listen, we are looking at this. We've had consultations with people. This is what we're saying is a possibility that will make things better. It is for us now as a community to say, okay, these experts have put this here. We have put our input in it as locals. How are we going to make this happen? But it's just sitting there, growing dust, collecting dust. And it's a good starting point, Madam Speaker, for reimagining what the Port Elizabeth area could look like. It is a treasure, Madam Speaker. There are a few countries in the Caribbean, you have that beachfront area with those large almond trees, basically undeveloped, no buildings on there. And that will stay like that in perpetuity. One time ago, one of the almond trees break down the other day. A few years now. We were doing the light up there and the almond tree break down. We used to put lights in it. And this gentleman decided, well, you know what? Don't put back an almond tree. Maybe what you could do is you could put like a little seating area and so on and make concrete. And you see, people said, you're crazy. You have to plant back the almond tree. So they put back the almond tree and it's now big and beautiful. That is like a sacred spot. You can't change it. The point is that we have to, there are ways in which we can improve it to make it more beneficial to the community. So, streetlights, Madam Speaker, all over. I mean, sometimes I look with envy at some communities here on the mainland, and I think, why we can't get more streetlights in certain parts of my constituency, especially that it's a tourism destination. In fact, people walking along the road from Lower Bay to the harbour along that main road there, and there are very few lights. There's a community called Union Level, Madam Speaker. They must have like 3 or 4 street lights for the entire community. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now we have street lights that are used, that are more cost effective because they're using the LED lights. They're a lot cheaper to operate. And so you should be able to multiply the number of street lights available and still not cost more. But in fact, that hasn't happened. So I'm making a plea that we need more street lights all throughout Port Elizabeth and in various communities and in the road from the harbour to Lower Bay. And finally, Madam Speaker, it breaks my heart to hear, the Minister of Tourism said that they're going to redevelop the Beckwith Easter Regatta. We had 2 major festivals emerging out of Beckwith. One was the Easter Regatta, which has a long history. The other was Music Fest, which started about just over 20 years ago, which started small and was growing, Madam Speaker. The regatta, we haven't had for the last 2 years. The minister said, they're going to do it this year, but, I hope he can, but I'm skeptical. That he's talking about something bigger and better and so forth, but I don't want to see it start back at least before you can start about something different, because we haven't had it in the last 2 or 3 years. So what we have, Madam Speaker, is that the Music Fest that we've had and loved, and that has grown organically and become something that people actually book their visits to come to the island because of that thing. When you come to the community as a tourist and you take part in something, that is okay, that's good. But when you go away and you book to come back for that thing, then it now becomes a draw for the tourism. It's multiplying. The tourism product is attracting people to the island, and that is something that has started to happen. But I'm told this year, Madam Speaker, last year there was a very truncated Music Fest. I hear funding is a problem, and that this year there is none at all. If that is the case, that is a great sadness, Madam Speaker, because we should be growing these things, because we are talking about offering more to the visitors when they are here, so that they could max out their credit cards. But Madam Speaker, if this doesn't happen, then it would be a great shame to do it. There's another festival that has started over the past 10 years or so. I don't know if it's that long. It's called it used to be called Broadway to Beckwith, which is a theatre festival. But they're doing it now, Beckwith International Theatre, which starts in February. It should come down. This is it's something that's done by an artist from an actor from the United States who lives in Beckwith, has a house there, and decided that it's something that would enhance the community. And I've certainly been taking part and going to the shows and so forth over the years, and they are wonderful. And they start in February. I'm giving a little plug for them. Not that they need it, because it's a small venue, it's always sold out. From February 3rd, I think, to the 19th or thereabouts of February. It's called Beckwith International Theatre, put on by Mr. John Bustine and his wife, Christine. Madam Speaker, I've spoken for a long time. I have ended basically dealing with stuff with respect to my constituency. But I want, Madam Speaker, to urge this government to become more sensitive to the needs of the people, to deal with the problems as they arise, to meet the people where they are. Don't conceive of things as you would like them to be. Don't present a budget that doesn't add up, because it makes you look good. Don't present, as the minister did, a presentation in his presentation, present as if somehow we have landed, in all of our problems are over. Don't present as though the security situation in the country doesn't require urgent attention. All of these things, Madam Speaker, speaks to the failure of this budget. And that is why I can't support it, and this is why I believe that the minister needs to wheel and come again, because he has failed the people one more time. Thank you.
For the debate. Oh. If you so desire, sure. No, you can't move the lunch. Yes, well, he did rise, but he didn't indicate that he was speaking next. Yes. Honorable Minister of Transport.
It is now approximately 1:15.
Yes.
And so I beg to move that the House stands suspended to 3:15 for the lunch interval.
Honorable members, by my watch, it is 1:17. The motion is that the House do stand suspended until 3:15 for the luncheon period. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. House stands suspended.
Thank you.